I showed up to my wife's office with a flower bouquet and a flight ticket to Paris for Valentine, only to see my wife's co-workers congratulating her on her engagement with the CEO. Then my wife kissed him and flashed the diamond ring, while everyone cheered. So I walked away, quietly canceled every payment, trip, and pulled out my 83% company share, $557 million worth. Minutes later, my phone lit up with 356 missed calls, and someone showed up at my door. So here's the thing about Valentine's Day. It's basically a corporate conspiracy designed to make guys like me panic buy overpriced flowers and pretend we're romantic geniuses. But after 7 years of marriage to Sophia Monroe, I figured I'd actually earned the right to do something genuinely thoughtful. Hence why I'm standing in the marble and glass cathedral that is Leorateca's lobby at 9 a.m. sharp, clutching a bouquet of red roses that cost more than most people's car payments and 2 first-class tickets to Paris that I'd been planning for months. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Adrian, you romantic genius, surprising your wife at work like some kind of rom-com hero. Trust me, that's exactly what I was thinking too. 7 years of marriage, and I wanted to recapture that spark from the early days when she'd look at me like I hung the moon instead of like I forgot to take out the trash again. The Leoratec lobby is one of those aggressively modern spaces that screams, "We have money, and we want you to know it." Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek reception desk that probably costs more than a house, and enough chrome to blind a small aircraft. The kind of place where you feel underdressed even when you're wearing a $1,000 suit. Which, for the record, I absolutely was. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head about 50 times. Walk in, find Sophia, present flowers with a flourish, reveal the Paris tickets like some kind of magician pulling rabbits out of hats. Maybe she'd tear up a little. Maybe she'd kiss me right there in front of everyone. Maybe we'd have one of those moments that reminds you why you fell in love in the first place. But here's the thing about life. It's got a twisted sense of humor that makes Murphy's Law look optimistic. The first clue something was off? The noise. Instead of the usual corporate hum of keyboards clicking and coffee machines gurgling, I heard clapping. Like, enthusiastic clapping. The kind you hear at graduation ceremonies or when someone announces they're pregnant. The second clue. The phones. Every single person in that lobby had their phone out, cameras flashing like I'd walked into a paparazzi convention. Which, let me tell you, is not exactly the intimate romantic moment I was going for. And then I saw it. Or rather, I saw them. Right there in the center of the atrium, surrounded by what looked like half the company's workforce, was my wife. Sophia Monroe, in all her perfectly coiffed, designer-dressed glory. And she wasn't alone. Damien Locke, CEO of our biggest competitor, tall enough to play basketball and groomed like he stepped out of a men's magazine, was down on one knee, in front of my wife, sliding what looked suspiciously like a diamond ring onto her finger. For a second, I thought maybe I was having some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Maybe I'd finally snapped from too many 18-hour work days, and my brain was playing tricks on me. But then Sophia leaned down and kissed him. Not a quick peck, not an awkward business relationship thing. A full-on, passionate, "I've been waiting for this moment my whole life" kiss. The crowd erupted. "Congratulations," they chanted, like they were at a sporting event and their team had just scored the winning touchdown. Phones kept flashing. Someone might have actually thrown confetti, though that could have been the stress-induced hallucination thing again. I stood there like a statue, still holding my romantic gesture supplies, watching my marriage implode in real time while surrounded by what felt like the world's most enthusiastic audience. The roses in my hand suddenly felt ridiculous, like showing up to a gunfight with a water balloon. The Paris tickets might as well have been Monopoly money. 7 years of marriage, and apparently I'd missed the memo about the divorce. Here's what's really messed up. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the flowers dramatically and storm out like some scorned lover in a soap opera. I didn't even clear my throat loudly or make one of those passive-aggressive comments that would have at least acknowledged my existence. I just stood there, processing the fact that my wife was currently making out with another man while wearing his engagement ring. And somehow the most surreal part was that everyone else seemed totally fine with this situation. Like they'd all gotten an invitation to this little celebration, and somehow mine had gotten lost in the mail. Chloe Tan, the receptionist, caught my eye from behind her desk. Poor kid looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. She gave me this bewildered look that clearly said, "Sir, I have no idea what's happening here, but I'm pretty sure it's not good. I nodded at her, because apparently my brain had decided that polite acknowledgement was the appropriate response to watching your marriage end in front of a live studio audience, and turned around. The New York wind hit me like a slap in the face as I walked back onto the street. February in the city is brutal on a good day, but when you're carrying dead roses and useless plane tickets, it feels downright vindictive. I stood there on the sidewalk for a moment, watching people hurry past in their winter coats, everyone wrapped up in their own little worlds, completely oblivious to the fact that mine had just gotten nuked from orbit. The funny thing about betrayal is how quiet it is in the moment. You'd expect violins or dramatic music or at least some kind of soundtrack to mark the occasion. Instead, you get car horns and the distant rumble of the subway and the sound of your own breathing, which suddenly seems way too loud. I looked down at the roses in my hand. Still perfect, still red, still completely pointless. The Paris tickets were getting soggy from the humidity, probably ruined already. 7 years of marriage, and this is how it ends. Not with a fight or a conversation or even a text message. With a public engagement party that I apparently wasn't invited to. Welcome to my life, folks. Population: one very confused, very betrayed, and very pissed off husband who just learned that his wife has been auditioning for a replacement. So there I was, back in my penthouse like some kind of wounded animal returning to its cave. 34th floor of a building that cost more than most small countries' GDP, with a view of Manhattan that real estate agents describe as breathtaking, and I usually call Tuesday. But today it looked like a concrete graveyard, and I felt right at home that I set those pathetic roses on the kitchen counter like I was laying flowers on a grave. Which, let's be honest, I basically was. The marriage was dead. I just hadn't gotten the death certificate yet. The Paris ticket sat next to them, soggy and useless, like a cruel joke the universe had decided to play on me. Here's the thing about being betrayed. Your brain goes through this weird process where it tries to make sense of something that fundamentally doesn't make sense. Like, how do you wake up married and go to bed? Whatever the hell I was now. Divorced? Separated? Publicly humiliated? There really should be a better word for guy whose wife just got engaged to someone else while he was holding Valentine's gifts. But then something clicked. Maybe it was the shock wearing off, or maybe it was the 3 fingers of Glendronach I'd just poured myself. 25-year-old single malt that costs more per ounce than most people make in an hour. Whatever it was, my brain shifted from wounded husband mode to pissed-off businessman mode. And that's when I remembered something very important. I walked over to my office. Because yes, I have an office in my apartment. Because when you're worth what I'm worth, you can have whatever the hell you want, and stopped in front of my favorite piece of art. It's this gorgeous oil painting of the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset, commissioned from some artist in Soho who charges ridiculous amounts to paint things you can see for free if you just walk outside. But the painting isn't the point. The painting is what's hiding the safe that I punched in the code, Sophia's birthday, because I'm apparently a sentimental idiot, and pulled out a folder labeled Core Assets. Boring name for what might be the most important documents in my life, but I've always believed in understated file organization. Inside that folder were the papers that told the real story. The incorporation documents for Leoratech, dated 7 years ago. The patent filings for the core technology that makes everything work, filed under my name, Adrian Kwan. The funding receipts showing exactly who put up the initial capital. The ownership structure that everyone seems to have conveniently forgotten, 83%. That's how much of Leoratech I own. $557 million worth of company, and I own 83% of it. Sophia? She owns exactly 0%. She's an employee, a very well-paid, very public-facing employee, but an employee nonetheless. The face of the company, as the board likes to say. The one who goes to conferences and gives interviews and poses for magazine covers, while I do the actual work of keeping the lights on. Don't get me wrong. She's good at what she does. Brilliant, even. She can work a room like a politician, charm investors like a snake oil salesman, and make our boring-as-hell enterprise software sound like the most exciting thing since sliced bread. But at the end of the day, she's the actress, and I'm the director, producer, and guy who owns the theater. I spread the documents across my desk like I was planning a military campaign. Which, come to think of it, I basically was. 7 years of letting my wife take credit for my work, 7 years of standing in the background while she got the applause, 7 years of being the technical guy while she was the visionary. Well, congratulations, Sophia. You just declared war on the guy who built the kingdom you're trying to rule. That I opened my laptop and logged into the Leoritech financial systems. Not the pretty dashboard that the board sees, not the simplified reports that get sent to investors. The real systems. The ones that actually control where the money goes. See, here's something most people don't understand about modern businesses. Everything runs on access codes and permissions and digital signatures. You can't just walk into a bank with a briefcase and demand cash like some kind of movie villain. Everything is ones and zeros, passwords and protocols. And guess who designed all those protocols? Your boy Adrian. That's who I started with the corporate credit cards. Sophia's card, which she uses for everything from business lunches to personal shopping sprees. Frozen. Damien's company card, which somehow ended up linked to our expense system during some strategic partnership nonsense. Also frozen. Then I moved on to the operational accounts. The money we use for payroll, vendor payments, office expenses, basically everything that keeps Leoritech running on a day-to-day basis. I didn't freeze them, exactly. That would be nuclear. But I did implement what I like to call emergency financial protocols. Basically, any expense over $1,000 now requires my personal approval. Any transfer to external accounts needs my digital signature. Any attempt to access our reserve funds triggers a security review that goes straight to my phone. Is it petty? Maybe. Is it legal? Absolutely. Is it going to make Sophia's life very complicated very quickly? Oh, you bet your ass it is. My phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails piling up faster than I could count. 20 missed calls became 40. 40 became 100. The notification sounds were so constant, it was like having a very angry cricket living in my pocket. I picked up the phone and looked at the caller ID. Sophia. 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 Damien. Elena, Sophia's assistant. Janet Cross, our CFO. Some number I didn't recognize. Sophia again. I flipped the phone face down and took another sip of my scotch. Here's the thing about scorched earth tactics. Once you start, you have to commit. You can't blow up the bridge and then complain that you can't get across the river. And right now, I was feeling very committed to some bridge burning. I pulled up our travel booking system and canceled the company's upcoming executive retreat to Aruba. The one Sophia had been planning for weeks. The one that was supposed to be a team-building exercise for senior management. Funny how team-building exercises always seem to happen in tropical locations with 5-star resorts. Gone. Cancelled. Refunded to the company account, which was now under my direct control. I canceled the catering contract for next week's investor presentation. The one with the artisanal cheese boards and champagne fountains that costs more than most people's annual salary. Gone. The premium parking spaces that Sophia had somehow convinced accounting were business necessities. Reverted to standard employee parking. The corporate membership to that exclusive gym downtown where she does networking lunches. Suspended pending review. By the time I was done, I'd systematically dismantled every perk, every convenience, every little luxury that Sophia had built into her corporate lifestyle. And the beautiful part? It was all completely legal, completely within my rights as majority owner, and completely devastating to someone who'd gotten used to living like a queen. My phone was still buzzing like an angry hornet. The number of missed calls had to be in the hundreds by now. But I just sat there, surrounded by the paperwork that proved I owned this empire, sipping my scotch and watching the city lights twinkle below. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Morning came with the kind of silence that feels dangerous. You know that moment in horror movies right before the killer jumps out? That's what my penthouse felt like at 7 a.m. No buzzing phone. I'd finally turned the damn thing off around 3 a.m. when the missed call count hit something like 347. No traffic noise filtering up from 34 floors below. Just me, my coffee machine, and the lingering taste of last night's scotch. I was halfway through my first cup of actually decent coffee. None of that green smoothie bullshit Sophia had tried to convert me to, when the intercom crackled to life. Mr. Kwan, Patrick Delgado, the concierge, sounded like he was walking on eggshells. Patrick's worked this building for 15 years, seen everything from messy divorces to federal investigations, and he's got this professional poker face that could make a casino dealer jealous. But today, Today he sounded nervous. Yeah, Patrick, what's up? Sir, there's a young woman down here in the lobby. Says she works for your wife. I mean, Mrs. Monroe. She looks pretty distressed, sir. Should I send her up? Elena Vargas. Had to be. Sophia's assistant, 26 years old, fresh out of NYU with a business degree and enough optimism to power a small city. Kid's been working for Sophia for 2 years, doing everything from scheduling meetings to picking up dry cleaning, and she genuinely believes she's learning from a visionary. Poor thing has no idea she's been working for a professional bullshit artist. Send her up, Patrick. Thanks. 5 minutes later, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Elena looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Her usually perfect makeup was streaked with mascara. Her blonde hair was doing this weird thing where it looked like she'd been running her hands through it all night, and she was clutching an overstuffed handbag like it contained the secrets of the universe. Mr. Kwan, she said, and her voice cracked like she was 13 years old. I'm so sorry to bother you, but something's wrong with the systems and I don't know what to do, and Ms. Monroe isn't answering her phone, and, Elena. I held up a hand. Breathe. Come in. She stumbled into my living room like a lost tourist, looking around at the minimalist furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows with the kind of awe that said she'd never been in a place that cost this much per square foot. Which, let's be honest, she probably hadn't. Coffee? I asked. Yes, please. Thank you. I haven't slept, and she collapsed onto my couch like her legs had given out. I poured her a mug and handed it over. She wrapped her hands around it like it was a life preserver. Okay, I said, settling into the chair across from her. What's going on? The floodgates opened. The payroll system is frozen, she said, words tumbling out like she'd been holding them in all night. Nobody got paid this morning. Not just the executives, nobody. The cleaning crew, the security guards, the junior developers. Jenny from accounting called me crying because her babysitter bounced, and she can't afford another one if she doesn't get paid today. She took a shaky breath and kept going. And the investor summit. The one next week with the Goldman Sachs people? The venue called and said our deposit got reversed. Something about insufficient funds, which doesn't make sense because we had $12 million in the operational account last week. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. Elena's eyes were getting wider and more panicked. And then Ms. Monroe's corporate card got declined. At Starbucks, Mr. Kwan. Starbucks. She was trying to buy coffee for her meeting with the venture capital firm from Boston, and her card got declined for a $6 latte. She called me screaming, but I don't understand what happened. I checked with the bank, and they said the account is under some kind of administrative hold. What about Damien's card? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Same thing. He tried to pay for lunch yesterday, some fancy place in Midtown, and his card got denied too. The restaurant manager had to come over and everything. It was so embarrassing. Damien called me personally, which never happens, and he was furious. He kept asking if there was some kind of system glitch. Elena set down her coffee mug and looked at me with those big, desperate eyes that people get when their world is falling apart and they can't figure out why. Mr. Kwan, is it a glitch? Because I've been up all night trying to figure out what went wrong, and I can't find anything. The systems look normal from my end, but nothing's working. It's like someone just turned everything off. I stood up and walked over to my desk, pulled out a cream-colored envelope with Elena's name written on it in my careful handwriting. I'd prepared it the night before, during my scotch-fueled strategic planning session. Elena, I said, handing her the envelope. I need you to give this to Sophia. Tell her she has 24 hours. She took the envelope with trembling hands. 24 hours for what? To resign as CEO, publicly acknowledge that I'm the founder and majority owner of Leoratech, and begin repaying the personal expenses she's charged to the company over the past 3 years. The amount comes to approximately $473,000. It's all itemized in the letter. Elena's face went white. Like vampire white. Mr. Kwan, I don't understand. Is this about yesterday? At the office. Smart kid. Smarter than I'd given her credit for. Elena, let me ask you something. Did you think it was normal? Your boss getting engaged to another man while her husband was standing in the lobby holding flowers. She looked down at her hands. I know, sir. I thought it was really weird. But Ms. Monroe said you two were separated, that you'd agreed to an amicable divorce, and that the engagement was just timing. Did she tell you that before or after I walked in? Elena's silence was answer enough. Here's the thing, Elena. Leora Tech isn't our company. It's my company. I founded it. I built it. I own 83% of it. Sophia is an employee. A very well-paid employee, but an employee nonetheless. And as of yesterday, she became an employee who's breaching her fiduciary duty to the company and engaging in activities that directly harm shareholder interests. I sat back down and looked at this kid who was probably making 35 grand a year and living in a studio apartment in Queens, working 60-hour weeks for a boss who charges designer handbags to the company expense account. The system isn't glitched, Elena. The system is working exactly as I designed it to work. Every account freeze, every declined card, every suspended service. That's me protecting the company from further financial abuse. Elena stared at the envelope like it might bite her. Should I tell her it's not a glitch? Tell her the truth, I said. Tell her that her husband, ex-husband, whatever we're calling it now, isn't the pushover she thought he was. Tell her that actions have consequences, and that some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt. She stood up on unsteady legs, clutching the envelope in her oversized purse. What about payroll? What about the employees who didn't do anything wrong? Payroll will resume as soon as Sophia signs the resignation letter that's in that envelope. The employees will be fine. It's management that needs to worry. Elena nodded, but she looked like she was about to cry again. Mr. Kwan, I know this isn't my place, but are you okay? And that's when I realized something. This 26-year-old assistant, who probably couldn't afford health insurance, was the first person to ask me that question. Not Sophia, not the board members, not any of the people who were supposedly on my side. Just Elena, who was stuck in the middle of a war she didn't start. I'm fine, Elena. Better than fine, actually. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She walked to the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, Mr. Kwan, I always thought you were the real genius behind Leora Tech. Ms. Monroe talks a good game, but you're the one who actually makes things work. Smart kid. Really smart kid. After she left, I poured myself another cup of coffee and watched the city wake up 34 floors below. Somewhere out there, Sophia was about to get a very unpleasant surprise that I couldn't wait. Here's something they don't tell you about declaring war on your wife. The waiting is the worst part. It's like sitting in a doctor's office, except instead of finding out if that weird mole is cancerous, you're waiting to see how spectacularly your marriage is going to explode. That I spent most of the day doing what I do best, working. Locked myself in my home office, reviewed patent applications, analyzed market reports, basically anything that required enough brain power to keep me from obsessing over whatever nuclear meltdown was happening at Leora Tech headquarters. My phone stayed off. The landline stayed unplugged. For all intents and purposes, Adrian Kwan had vanished from the face of the earth. Around 6 p.m., I ordered Thai food from that place on Columbus that doesn't care if you're worth $500 million or living paycheck to paycheck. They just make really good pad Thai and leave you alone. I ate dinner watching the sunset paint Manhattan in shades of orange and gold, trying to pretend this was just another Tuesday instead of the day I nuked my life from orbit. But by 11 p.m., I was pacing. 34 floors up, with a view that real estate agents call commanding, and I felt like a caged animal. The city spread out below me like a circuit board, all lights and patterns and logic, but up here in my ivory tower, nothing made sense anymore. That's when the pounding started. Not a polite knock. Not a doorbell. Actual pounding, like someone was trying to break down my door with their bare fists. The kind of desperate hammering that says emergency or police raid or ex-wife having a complete mental breakdown. I checked my watch. 11:45 p.m. Classy. Through the peephole, I could see her. Sophia Monroe, though I guess technically she was still Sophia Kwan for another few hours, standing in my hallway looking like she'd been through a blender. Her usually perfect makeup was streaked down her cheeks in black rivers. Her hair, which normally looked like she'd just stepped out of a salon, was doing this wild thing where half of it had escaped whatever she'd used to hold it back. And she was still wearing that engagement ring, the diamond catching the hallway light like a tiny spotlight announcing her betrayal. But here's the thing that really got me. She looked small. Sophia's never been tall, but she's got this presence that makes her seem bigger than she actually is. Command presence, they call it in the military. The ability to walk into a room, and have everyone automatically assume you're in charge. Tonight? Tonight, she looked like a lost kid who'd wandered away from her parents at the mall. I opened the door. Please, Adrian, she whispered, and her voice was this broken thing that didn't sound anything like the confident CEO who'd been giving TED Talks and gracing magazine covers. Don't do this. I leaned against the doorframe, not inviting her in, not closing the door. Just watching this woman I'd been married to for 7 years fall apart in my hallway. Don't do what exactly? You know what? She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, and I noticed her mascara had left black smudges on her sleeve. The accounts, the cards, the payroll. Elena told me about the letter. Oh, so you got my terms. They're insane, Adrian. $473,000? For business expenses? I almost laughed. Business expenses? Sophia, you charged a weekend at the Four Seasons to the company because you said you needed to recharge your creative energy. You bought a $12,000 handbag and claimed it was a networking tool. You hired a personal trainer and called it executive wellness. Those were legitimate. The fuck they were. The profanity just slipped out, and Sophia actually flinched. I don't curse much, never saw the point, but sometimes a situation calls for precision language. You've been treating Leoratech like your personal piggy bank for 3 years, and now you're pissed that someone finally noticed. She stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume. That expensive stuff that costs more per ounce than most people make in a day. It used to drive me crazy in a good way. Now it just made me tired. This isn't about the money, she said. This is about yesterday. About Damien. Is it? I know how it looked, but you don't understand the situation. We were going to tell you. The engagement was it was supposed to be temporary. A business arrangement. Now I did laugh, and it came out harsh and bitter. A business arrangement. Right. Is that what you call making out with another man in front of half our employees? Her face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Damien was supposed to propose quietly, and then we were going to use the engagement to leverage the merger talks with his company. It was strategic, Adrian. You know how these things work. Strategic. I repeated the word like it tasted bad. You got engaged to another man as a business strategy. It wasn't real. The engagement wasn't real. It was a way to test you. And there it was. The line that made me want to put my fist through the wall. Test me? Test me how exactly? To see if you'd fight for me. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been practicing them. To see if you still cared enough to get angry, to make a scene, to do something. Anything. We've been drifting apart for months, Adrian. You work 18-hour days. You barely talk to me. You act like I'm just another employee instead of your wife. I thought if I made you jealous, if I made you think you were losing me, maybe you'd remember why you married me in the first place. I stared at her for a long moment, processing this information. My wife had gotten engaged to another man to test my devotion. My wife had humiliated me in front of our entire company because she wanted to see if I cared enough to fight back. Well, I said finally, congratulations. You tested me. And now you know exactly how much fight I have left. Adrian, please. You know what the really fucked up part is, Sophia? If you just talked to me, if you just said, hey, I feel like we're growing apart. Maybe we should work on our marriage. I would have listened. I would have made changes. I would have fought for us. I pushed off from the doorframe and took a step back into my apartment. But you didn't do that. You decided to play games. You decided to manipulate me, to humiliate me, to test me like I was some kind of lab rat. And then you want to stand here and tell me it wasn't real. The engagement wasn't real, but the feelings, stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. You want to know what's real? This conversation is real. That ring on your finger is real. The fact that you're standing in my hallway at midnight crying about consequences is real. She looked down at the engagement ring like she'd forgotten it was there. I could give it back. I could make a public statement, say it was all a misunderstanding. We could use this, Adrian. We could use the drama to generate publicity for the company. People love a good redemption story. Jesus Christ, Sophia. Even now, even standing here with your marriage falling apart, you're thinking about publicity angles. It's what I do. It's who I am. No, I said. It's who you've become. And it's not someone I want to be married to anymore. She started crying harder then. These ugly, choking sobs that probably would have broken my heart yesterday. Today they just made me tired. I'll sign your letter, she whispered. I'll resign. I'll pay back the money. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't end us like this. Not over a stupid mistake. I looked at this woman who'd shared my bed for 7 years, who knew how I liked my coffee and which side of the bed I preferred, and the fact that I talk in my sleep when I'm stressed. This woman who'd just admitted to orchestrating an elaborate psychological manipulation because she thought it would be more effective than having an honest conversation. It's already ended, Sophia. This is just the paperwork. I started to close the door, then stopped. Oh, and Sophia, next time you want to test someone's love, maybe don't do it in front of a crowd with cameras. Some things can't be undone, no matter how sorry you are afterward. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Behind me, I could hear her sobbing in the hallway for a few more minutes before the sound of her heels clicking away toward the elevator. I poured myself another scotch and stood at the window, looking out at the city that never sleeps. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Here's something they don't teach you in business school. The best boardroom battles aren't won with PowerPoint presentations or market analysis. They're won by the guy who controls the money and has the biggest set of balls. And this morning, wearing a navy Tom Ford suit and the tie Sophia gave me for our 3rd anniversary, poetic irony at its finest, I was about to remind 12 very important people exactly who owns this circus. The Leoratech boardroom is one of those intimidating spaces designed to make people feel like they're conducting serious business. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls that overlook Manhattan, a conference table that probably cost more than most people's houses, and enough chrome and leather to outfit a luxury car dealership. The kind of room where billion-dollar deals get made and careers get destroyed, sometimes in the same conversation that I walked in at exactly 9 a.m., because punctuality is power, and surveyed my audience. 12 directors sat around that massive table like nervous disciples waiting for their messiah to show up. Janet Cross, our CFO, was clicking her pen in that rapid-fire pattern she does when she's stressed. Click, 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 pause. Click, 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 pause. Like a nervous metronome counting down to disaster. Marcus Webb, our lead investor from Goldman Sachs, was scrolling through his phone with the kind of focused intensity that said he was probably reading very unflattering articles about us. Dr. Patricia Huang, our head of R&D, looked like she hadn't slept in days. And sitting at the far end of the table, looking like she'd been dressed by a team of crisis management consultants, was my soon-to-be ex-wife. Sophia had pulled herself together since last night's hallway breakdown. Perfect makeup hiding the evidence of her midnight crying session, hair styled within an inch of its life, and a conservative black suit that screamed, responsible executive having a very bad week. She was clutching a manila envelope like it contained her last will and testament, which, come to think of it, it basically did. I took my seat at the head of the table. Because yes, I sit at the head of the table, because I own 83% of this company, and looked around the room with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you hold all the cards. Good morning, I said, setting my own folder on the table. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know yesterday's events have raised some questions, and I thought it was time we cleared the air. Marcus Webb cleared his throat. Adrian, we need to discuss the operational issues. The payroll freeze, the suspended accounts, the canceled investor summit. Our portfolio companies don't typically. Before we get to that, I interrupted, I think we need to establish some basic facts about Leoratech's ownership structure and leadership hierarchy. There seems to be some confusion in the market. I opened my folder and pulled out the incorporation documents, spreading them across the table like I was dealing cards. Leoratech was founded 7 years ago by me, Adrian Kwan. I provided the initial capital, developed the core technology, and filed all the foundational patents. I currently own 83% of the company. Dr. Huang leaned forward. Adrian, we all know you're the majority shareholder, but do we? I turned to face the board. Because yesterday I watched TechCrunch publish an article calling Sophia the visionary behind Leoratech's revolutionary platform. Last month, Forbes profiled her as the CEO who's redefining enterprise software. And 3 weeks ago, she gave a keynote at the Digital Innovation Summit where she talked about her company and her vision for the future. The pen clicking stopped. Janet's face had gone pale. Now, I understand that Sophia has been an excellent public face for the company. She's articulate, charismatic, and very good at explaining complex technology to people who don't understand it. But there's a difference between being a spokesperson and being a founder. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. Because yes, we have a whiteboard in our fancy boardroom. Because sometimes you need to draw pictures for people who make millions of dollars but can't grasp basic concepts. Let me break this down in terms everyone can understand. I grabbed a marker and started writing numbers. Leora Tech generated $1.2 billion in revenue last year. Of that, approximately $900 million came directly from licenses and implementations of patents that I developed and filed. Another $200 million came from consulting services based on proprietary algorithms that I created. The remaining $100 million came from various partnerships and integrations. More numbers went on the board. In the same period, Leora Tech spent $557 million on operations. Of that, $340 million went to legitimate business expenses, salaries, equipment, office space, actual business development. The remaining $217 million went to what I generously call executive lifestyle management. I turned back to the board. Artisanal coffee bars in every office. A corporate jet that's used more for weekend getaways than business travel. Executive retreats to tropical locations where the most strenuous activity is poolside networking. A marketing budget that's somehow larger than our R&D budget, despite the fact that our technology sells itself. Marcus was scribbling notes furiously. Dr. Huang looked like she was doing math in her head and not liking the results. Now, I continued, let's talk about yesterday's events. At approximately 9:15 a.m., while I was attempting to surprise my wife with Valentine's gifts, I discovered that she had become engaged to Damien Locke, CEO of Nexus Dynamics, our primary competitor. This engagement was announced publicly, in our lobby, in front of our employees, and was recorded by multiple devices. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. As majority owner, and as someone with a fiduciary duty to protect shareholder interests, I immediately implemented emergency financial protocols to prevent any potential conflicts of interest or misuse of company resources. These protocols will remain in place until we can ensure that Leora Tech's interests are being protected. I walked back to my seat but didn't sit down. Power move. Force everyone to look up at you. Which brings us to today's agenda item. I nodded toward Sophia. The resignation of our current CEO and the appointment of new leadership. Sophia stood up slowly, still clutching that manila envelope. When she spoke, her voice sounded like broken glass trying to form words. I, Sophia Monroe, hereby resign as Chief Executive Officer of Leora Tech, effective immediately. She opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I also want to make a public statement acknowledging that Adrian Kwan is the founder, majority owner, and true architect of Leora Tech's success. I have served as the public face of the company, but I was never its creator or visionary. She set the paper on the table like she was placing flowers on a grave. I take full responsibility for any confusion about the company's leadership structure, and I apologize to the board, our employees, and our investors for any damage my actions may have caused. The confession landed like a nuclear bomb in the middle of that pristine boardroom. Marcus Webb actually dropped his pen. Dr. Huang's mouth fell open. Janet was staring at the paper like it might spontaneously combust. Furthermore, Sophia continued, I acknowledge that certain personal expenses may have been inappropriately charged to company accounts, and I commit to working with our financial team to identify and repay any such charges. She sat down heavily, like her legs had given out. I let the silence stretch for a full 30 seconds before speaking. Thank you, Sophia. I accept your resignation. I turned to the board. I'm assuming the role of CEO and Financial Oversight Director, effective immediately. Any expenditures over $10,000 will require my personal approval. Any contracts or partnerships will require board review. Any public statements about company direction or strategy will come through me. Dr. Huang raised her hand like she was in school. What about Damien Locke? What about Nexus Dynamics? Damien Locke is permanently banned from any involvement with Leora Tech business. Any existing partnerships or collaborations with Nexus Dynamics are terminated as of today. We'll honor existing contracts, but there will be no new agreements. Marcus finally found his voice. Adrian, this is a significant change in leadership structure. The investors will want to see a transition plan, stability metrics. The investors, I said, sitting down and folding my hands, will get exactly what they've always wanted. a company run by the person who actually built it. Leoratech just became a lot more stable, not less. I looked around the table at 12 very expensive people who were slowly realizing that their understanding of this company had been fundamentally wrong for 7 years. Any other questions? The silence told me everything I needed to know. Good. Let's get to work. You know what's funny about crisis management consultants? They're like interior decorators for disasters. They want everything to look pretty and coordinated, even when your life is burning down around you. Which is why, 3 hours after my boardroom coup, I was sitting in a cramped conference room with 2 overpaid PR specialists who kept using phrases like narrative control and reputation rehabilitation. "We need to soften this," said Miranda Cole, a 40-something blonde who probably charged more per hour than most people make in a month. She was wearing one of those power suits that screams, "I went to Wharton and I want you to know it." And she'd been talking nonstop for 20 minutes about messaging strategy. Soften what exactly? I asked, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. The whole situation, the divorce, the engagement, the leadership change. Right now it looks like a soap opera. We need to make it look like a carefully planned transition. Her partner, some guy named Brad who looked like he'd stepped out of a men's magazine and talked like he'd swallowed a marketing textbook, nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. We craft a narrative about natural evolution, mutual respect, amicable separation. Make Sophia look like a visionary who's stepping back to pursue new opportunities. I looked at these two and wondered if they'd been dropped on their heads as children. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You want me to lie? You want me to pretend that my wife didn't publicly humiliate me, didn't embezzle company funds, and didn't get engaged to our biggest competitor while I was standing in the lobby holding flowers?" Miranda leaned forward with the kind of earnest expression that probably worked on naive startup founders. "We want you to control the narrative before someone else does. Right now, you look like a vengeful ex-husband who's using his business position to punish his wife. That's not good for anyone." "I am a vengeful ex-husband using my business position to punish my wife," I said. "That's literally exactly what's happening here. Why would I pretend otherwise?" Brad jumped in with his consultant voice. "Because perception is reality in the business world, Adrian. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It matters what people think happened." I stared at him for a long moment, then stood up and walked to the window. We were in one of those generic conference rooms that corporate lawyers love: beige walls, fluorescent lighting, furniture that looks like it was designed by a committee of accountants. The kind of place where souls go to die. "You know what?" I said, turning back to face them. "You're fired." Miranda blinked. "Excuse me. You're fired. Both of you. Send me your bill, and don't let the door hit you on the way out." They gathered their laptops and their dignity and left without another word. Crisis management consultants might be expensive, but they know when they've been dismissed. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a coffee shop on the Upper West Side that didn't care if I was worth $500 million or living paycheck to paycheck. Just black coffee, worn leather chairs, and the kind of anonymity you can only find in a city of 8 million people. Sophia walked in looking like she was going to her own execution. Gone was the power suit from the boardroom. Instead, she was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She looked like the woman I'd married 7 years ago, before the magazine covers and TED Talks and executive lifestyle management. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. "The PR people said you fired them," she said. "Yep. Why?" "Because they wanted me to lie about what happened. And I'm done lying." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and slid it across the table. "I wrote a statement. For the press release." I unfolded it and read. It was exactly the kind of corporate poetry that Miranda and Brad would have loved. Phrases like mutual decision to pursue separate paths and deep respect for our shared accomplishments, an exciting new chapter in both our personal and professional lives. Pure, grade A bullshit that I folded the paper back up and handed it to her. "No, Adrian, no. I'm not signing off on some fairy tale that makes you look like a visionary and me look like a supportive partner. That's not what happened." I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. "Here's what we're going to say." I started typing, reading aloud as I wrote. "Leoratech announces a change in leadership structure, effective immediately. Adrian Kwan, founder and majority owner of Leoratech, has assumed the role of Chief Executive Officer. Sophia Monroe has resigned from her position as CEO to pursue other opportunities. Sophia was shaking her head. That makes me sound like I was fired. You were fired. By your husband, for sleeping with the competition. But I'm being generous and calling it a resignation. Adrian, please. I held up a hand and kept typing. Mr. Kwon founded Leoratech 7 years ago and has been the primary architect of its technology platform and business strategy. Ms. Monroe served as the public face of the company during its growth phase. The transition reflects Leoratech's evolution into a more technically focused organization under its founder's direct leadership. I looked up at her. That's it. Simple, factual, and true. It doesn't explain anything. People are going to ask questions. Let them ask. The truth isn't complicated, Sophia. You got caught embezzling and cheating, and now you're facing consequences. Everything else is just noise. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. What about the engagement? What about Damien? What about him? People saw the video. It's all over social media. They're going to want to know how that fits into the timeline. I shrugged. That's between you and Damien. Leoratech's statement is about Leoratech business. Your personal life is your personal problem. But if you don't address it, people are going to assume what actually happened. That my wife got engaged to another man while she was still married to me, and that I responded by taking control of the company I built. Which is exactly what happened. I finished typing and showed her the screen. This goes out at 5 p.m. today. You can issue your own statement if you want to explain yourself, but this is Leoratech's official position. She read it again, her face getting paler with each word. This is going to destroy my reputation. Your reputation destroyed itself yesterday morning. I'm just declining to help rebuild it. Adrian, I know you're angry. I'm not angry anymore, I said, and realized it was true. I was angry last night. This morning I was furious. But right now I'm just tired. Tired of pretending, tired of letting you take credit for my work, tired of being the technical guy while you play CEO. I stood up and left a 20 on the table for coffee I hadn't finished. The statement goes out at 5. If you want to add anything, you've got until 4:30. What if I refuse to sign it? Then it goes out without your signature. And tomorrow I start talking to journalists about the $473,000 in fraudulent expenses. Your choice. I walked out of that coffee shop and into the afternoon Manhattan chaos, leaving my soon-to-be ex-wife sitting alone with a statement that told the truth for the first time in years. It's exactly 5 p.m. The press release went live. By 5:30, my phone was ringing off the hook with interview requests. By 6 p.m., TechCrunch had posted an article calling me the hidden genius behind Leoratech's success. By 8 p.m., Forbes wanted to do a cover story. Sophia's phone, I imagined, had gone very quiet very quickly. Funny how the truth works that way. You know what nobody tells you about becoming suddenly famous in the tech world? Everyone wants a piece of you, and 90% of them are complete vultures. 2 weeks after my press release turned Leoratech's leadership structure upside down, I was sitting in meetings with venture capitalists who pronounced my name wrong, startup founders who wanted me to validate their half-baked ideas, and reporters who kept asking if I was okay after my very public divorce. But then, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, I got an email that actually made me sit up and pay attention. Mr. Kwon. It began, "My name is Layla Park, and 6 months ago your ex-wife told me my idea was interesting but not commercially viable. I think she was wrong. Would you be willing to give me 30 minutes to prove it?" Attached was a pitch deck for something called Neuron Layer, an AI platform that could analyze emotional nuance in real-time communication. Not the usual AI will solve everything bullshit that every startup was peddling, but actual technical innovation with real-world applications that I'd never heard of. Layla Park, which was intriguing. In the tech world, especially in New York, everyone knows everyone, or at least pretends to. But this woman had somehow stayed under my radar while building something that looked genuinely revolutionary. I emailed back. Thursday, 2 p.m. My office. But then I changed my mind. Leoratech's offices were still too connected to Sophia, too full of champagne fountains and artisanal coffee bars, and the lingering scent of executive lifestyle management. If I was going to look at something real, something new, I wanted to do it somewhere that felt authentic, which is how I found myself standing in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, breathing air that smelled like coffee beans and machine oil, and the particular energy that comes from people actually building things instead of just talking about building things. Layla Park turned out to be 27 years old, 5'0", with the kind of focused intensity that made you pay attention even when she was just shaking your hand. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that had actual coffee stains on it, not the kind of carefully curated casual that tech executives wear to prove they're one of the people, but the real thing. The uniform of someone who'd been coding for 18 hours straight and forgotten that food exists. "Mr. Kwan," she said, leading me through a space that was part office, part laboratory, part controlled chaos. "Thank you for coming out here. I know it's not exactly Manhattan corporate." "That's exactly why I wanted to come here," I said, looking around at workstations that were obviously built for function over form, whiteboards covered in actual equations instead of marketing slogans, and a coffee setup that involved a single, ancient machine instead of a barista who charged more per latte than most people make in an hour. The team was small. Maybe 15 people, all young, all looking like they'd rather be coding than eating or sleeping or dealing with whatever existential crisis was currently trending on social media. The kind of people who built things because they couldn't help themselves, not because they wanted to get rich and famous. "Show me what you've got," I said. Layla walked me over to a workstation where 3 monitors displayed what looked like a conversation analysis in real time. Traditional AI can parse language for keywords, sentiment, basic emotional indicators, she explained, her hands moving as she talked. But it misses the nuance. The difference between genuine enthusiasm and polite agreement. The gap between what someone says and what they actually mean. She pulled up a demo, a customer service chat where the AI was analyzing not just the words being typed, but the rhythm of the typing, the pause patterns, the subtle linguistic choices that revealed frustration, confusion, genuine satisfaction. "This is a live customer service interaction," she said. "Watch the emotional mapping." On the screen, colors shifted and flowed as the conversation progressed. Green for genuine satisfaction, yellow for mild confusion, red for building frustration. But more than that, the AI was tracking micro-patterns, identifying the exact moment when a customer went from slightly annoyed to ready to cancel their subscription. "Jesus," I said, because sometimes technical elegance just hits you in the gut. You're reading between the lines in real time. Exactly. And not just in customer service. Imagine this in therapy sessions, helping therapists identify when a patient is minimizing their problems. In negotiations, helping lawyers understand when the other side is bluffing. In education, helping teachers know when a student is genuinely confused versus just not paying attention. I watched the demo run through scenario after scenario, and each one made more sense than the last. This wasn't some pie-in-the-sky AI fantasy. This was practical, immediate, useful technology that could be implemented tomorrow. "What did Sophia say when you pitched this?" I asked. Layla's expression darkened. She said emotional intelligence couldn't be quantified, that the technology was interesting but not commercially viable, and that Leoratech was focused on more scalable solutions. Then she spent 20 minutes telling me about some champagne fountain they were installing in the executive conference room. I laughed, not the bitter laugh I'd been doing a lot of lately, but actual amusement. "Yeah, that sounds like Sophia." She never understood that the best technology solves real problems instead of creating pretty presentations. "The thing is," Layla continued, "I know this works. We've been running pilots with 3 companies for 6 months. Customer satisfaction is up 30%, employee retention is up 20%, and one of our pilot companies increased their sales conversion rate by 45% just by understanding emotional context in their client interactions." She pulled out a tablet and showed me the metrics. Real numbers, real results, real impact. The kind of data that made investors write checks and competitors start panicking. "What do you need?" I asked. "Funding to scale the platform, partnerships with companies that actually want to solve problems, and a board seat for someone who understands that technology should make people's lives better, not just make PowerPoint presentations look impressive." I looked around the warehouse again, at the team of brilliant kids who were building something that could change how humans communicate, at the workstations that prioritized function over form, at the energy of people who believe they could actually make the world better through code. 25 million for 40% and a board seat, I said, Layla blinked. I what? $25 million for 40% equity and a board seat. Standard terms. I'll have my lawyers draft the paperwork by Friday. The warehouse went quiet. Not the nervous quiet of people afraid they're about to get fired, but the stunned quiet of people who've just realized their dreams are about to become reality. Mr. Kwan, Layla said, are you serious? Dead serious. But I have conditions. Her face got cautious. What kind of conditions? No champagne fountains. No artisanal coffee bars. No executive retreats to tropical locations. No marble lobbies or ice sculptures or any of the bullshit that turns a tech company into a lifestyle brand. You keep doing what you're doing, building things that matter. The team erupted in cheers. Someone might have actually cried. Diego Ramos, one of the senior engineers who'd somehow escaped the Leoratech corporate culture wars, was grinning like he'd won the lottery. Also, I added, you're hiring Elena Vargas as your operations manager. She's been working for people who don't appreciate intelligence and dedication. I think she'd fit in better here. As I walked back to my car, leaving behind a warehouse full of brilliant people who were about to change the world, I realized something. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something real instead of just managing something pretty. Sophia could keep her champagne fountains. I had something better. I had the future. Here's something nobody tells you about being worth $500 million. Eventually, you realize that marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows and views that make real estate agents weep don't actually make you happy. They just make you expensive. Which is why, 6 weeks after nuking my marriage and taking back my company, I was standing in the empty penthouse that used to be my home, watching movers wrap my life in bubble wrap and cardboard. The penthouse had been Sophia's idea, of course. We need a space that reflects our success, she'd said, which translated to, I want a place that makes other people jealous when they see it on Instagram. 34 floors above Manhattan, 3,000 square feet of aggressively modern design, and enough marble to outfit a small mausoleum. The kind of place where you're afraid to put your feet up because everything costs more than most people's cars. But as I watched the movers tape up boxes and dismantle furniture that I'd never actually liked, I felt lighter. Like I was shedding skin that had never quite fit right. Sir, one of the movers, a guy named Carlos who'd been doing this job for 20 years and had the arms to prove it, gestured toward the kitchen. What about the espresso machine? I looked at the chrome monstrosity that took up half the counter space and required a PhD in mechanical engineering to operate. Sophia had bought it because some lifestyle blogger said it was essential for the modern executive. I'd used it maybe twice, and both times I'd ended up just going to the deli downstairs for actual coffee. Leave it, I said. The new owners can figure out what to do with it. 3 hours later, I was standing in what was about to become my new home, a 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side that cost about 1/10 of what the penthouse had been worth. Hardwood floors that creaked in all the right places, windows that actually opened, and a kitchen where you could make coffee without a computer science degree. The building was one of those pre-war places that had actual character instead of designer character. My neighbors weren't investment bankers or corporate lawyers or people who introduced themselves by mentioning their net worth. They were teachers and artists and grad students and people who held the elevator for strangers and said, thank you, when you did the same. Mrs. Chen from 4B brought me homemade dumplings on my first day. Welcome to the building, she said, like it was perfectly normal to feed your neighbors instead of pretending they didn't exist. When I told her I was between jobs, technically true, she didn't ask what I did before or how much money I made. She just said the dumplings were better reheated in a pan, not the microwave. That first night, sitting on my couch, an actual comfortable couch, not some designer torture device that looked good in magazines. Eating Mrs. Chen's dumplings and listening to the sounds of people living actual lives instead of performing success, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace, which is probably why, when Columbia University called 3 days later, I didn't hang up immediately. Mr. Kwan, said Dr. Margaret Torres, chair of the computer science department, we'd like to offer you a visiting professorship. 1 class per semester, graduate level, focus on practical applications of emerging technologies. Teaching. When was the last time I'd thought about teaching? Probably never, if I'm being honest. My career had been about building things, selling things, scaling things. The idea of standing in front of a classroom, and actually explaining concepts instead of just implementing them felt completely foreign. What would I be teaching? I asked. Whatever you want. Your expertise in AI implementation, your experience with large-scale system architecture, your insights into turning research into viable products. The students need to hear from someone who's actually built things instead of just studying them. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. I'll do it. 2 weeks later, I was standing in front of 23 graduate students who looked like they'd been living on coffee and determination for the past 6 months. Which, let's be honest, they probably had. Graduate school in computer science is basically an endurance test disguised as education. Good morning, I said, looking out at faces that ranged from cautiously optimistic to completely exhausted. I'm Adrian Kwan, and before we start, let me tell you what this class isn't going to be about. I wrote on the whiteboard. Yes, an actual whiteboard, not some fancy digital display. Theory without application. Code without purpose. Innovation without impact. This class is about building things that matter, not building things that look impressive on your resume or make investors write checks, but building things that actually solve real problems for real people. A hand shot up. Student in the back row, wearing a hoodie that had definitely seen better days. Professor Kwan, what's the difference between innovation and impact? Good question. I pointed to her. What's your name? Arya Nguyen. Arya, how many of you have spent the last semester working on projects that you know will never be used by anyone except your professors? About half the hands in the room went up. Honest kids, that's innovation without impact. You're solving theoretical problems with elegant solutions that will live and die in academic papers. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not what this class is about. I walked over to the window, looked out at the campus where students were hurrying between classes, probably stressing about deadlines and job interviews, and whether they'd ever actually use anything they were learning. Impact is when a 30-year-old single mother in Detroit uses your software to manage her small business more efficiently, so she can spend more time with her kids. Impact is when a therapist in rural Montana can better understand their patients because your AI helps them recognize emotional patterns they might have missed. Impact is when technology makes someone's life genuinely better, not just more convenient. Another hand. This one from a tall kid in the front row who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Tund Okafor, he said, introducing himself with a slight Nigerian accent. How do you balance impact with profitability? I mean, helping people is great, but companies need to make money to survive. Smart question. The kind that showed he was thinking beyond the classroom. Tund, here's something the business world doesn't want you to know. The most profitable companies are usually the ones that solve real problems really well. Everything else is just marketing. I spent the next hour talking about neuron layer, about identifying genuine needs versus manufactured ones, about the difference between building technology that improves people's lives and building technology that just makes their problems more expensive. After class, Arya and Tund stayed behind. Professor Kwan, Arya said, that single mother in Detroit you mentioned, is that a real example? Not yet, I said, but it could be. That's what we're going to work on this semester. Tund was taking notes in a worn notebook that looked like it had survived several academic wars. You really think we can build something that matters? I don't think you can, I said. I know you can. The question is whether you want to. Walking home that evening, past the Korean restaurant where the owner remembered how I liked my bulgogi, past the bookstore where they knew I was working my way through their entire philosophy section, past the park where kids played pickup basketball and nobody cared what anyone did for a living, I realized something. This was what success actually looked like. Not marble countertops or champagne fountains or magazine covers. Just people doing meaningful work, treating each other with basic human decency, and building things that made the world a little bit better. My phone buzzed. Text message from Elena, who was settling in beautifully at Neuron Layer. The Microsoft deal went through. Layla says to tell you the team wants to take you out to celebrate. Somewhere with actual food, not a networking event. I smiled and typed back. I know just the place. Living quietly, it turns out, is a skill. For the first time in maybe a decade, I wasn't checking my phone every 30 seconds or scheduling meetings that could have been emails or pretending to care about quarterly projections that were really just elaborate guessing games. Instead, I was grading papers from students who actually wanted to learn something. drinking coffee that came from a machine I could operate without an engineering degree, and discovering that Manhattan has actual neighborhoods where people know each other's names. 6 months after the Great Leoritech implosion, my life had settled into something that felt suspiciously like contentment. Teach Tuesday and Thursday mornings, spend afternoons working with Layla's team on projects that might actually change the world, evenings reading books that had nothing to do with business strategy or market disruption or any of the other buzzwords that pass for wisdom in corporate America. I was sitting in my favorite chair, an actual comfortable chair that I'd bought because it was comfortable, not because it would look good in photos, reading a biography of Richard Feynman and thinking about how to explain quantum computing to graduate students when the doorbell rang. The mail carrier, a woman named Rosa who'd been delivering to this building for 15 years and knew everyone's coffee preferences, handed me a stack of bills and catalogs and one envelope that made me stop in the hallway. Cream-colored paper, expensive weight, handwritten address in careful script. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. 7 years of marriage teaches you things like that. Sophia. I stood there for a long moment, holding that letter like it might explode. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened, let whatever she had to say disappear into the New York City waste management system along with all the other garbage. But curiosity won out, like it usually does. Back in my apartment, I opened the envelope carefully, because apparently I'm the kind of person who still respects good stationery, even when it comes from people who've betrayed me. The letter was 3 pages long, written in the same careful script on matching paper. Real paper, the kind that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. Even in exile, Sophia maintained her standards. Adrian, I don't expect you to read this, but I needed to write it. Therapy. Yes, I'm in therapy now. Dr. Miranda Castellanos in Portland, if you're wondering, says that sometimes we need to say things out loud, even if the other person never hears them. But I'm hoping you'll hear this that I'm in Portland now. Teaching coding to kids who can't afford computers, working with a nonprofit that refurbishes old laptops and gets them to families who need them. It's not glamorous work. There are no magazine covers or TED Talks or networking events with artisanal cheese boards. Just kids who want to learn and computers that crash more often than they work, and the kind of satisfaction that doesn't photograph well for Instagram, that I had to stop reading and pour myself a cup of coffee. Portland. Teaching kids. The woman who used to complain about flying commercial was now apparently working with nonprofit organizations and refurbished computers. The funny thing is, I'm good at it. Not good at teaching. I'm still learning that part, but good at connecting with these kids. They don't care that I used to be on magazine covers or that I know how to work a room full of investors. They care that I can show them how to write code that does something useful, how to solve problems that matter to them. Last week, a 15-year-old named Marcus built an app that helps his grandmother track her medications. Nothing fancy, just a simple reminder system with a user interface designed for someone with arthritis. It's not going to change the world or make anyone rich, but it's going to help one person live a little easier. And watching Marcus demo it to the class, seeing how proud he was of building something that mattered, I understood something I should have figured out years ago. You tried to teach me this, didn't you? The difference between being important and being authentic. Between building things that look impressive and building things that actually work. Between performing success and actually achieving it. I set the letter down and walked to the window. Outside, Mrs. Chun was tending to the small garden she'd somehow convinced the building management to let her plant in the courtyard. Nothing fancy, just tomatoes and herbs and flowers that made the space feel alive instead of just functional. I know this doesn't excuse what I did. I know saying sorry doesn't undo the humiliation or the betrayal or the fact that I spent 3 years treating your company like my personal piggy bank. I know that getting engaged to Damien while you were standing in the lobby with flowers is probably the most selfish, cruel thing I've ever done to another human being. But I want you to know that it wasn't calculated. It wasn't some master plan to hurt you or steal your company or manipulate the situation to my advantage. It was just stupidity. The kind of stupidity that comes from believing your own press releases, from thinking that the character you play in public is the same as the person you actually are. Damien and I lasted exactly 6 weeks after you froze the accounts. Turns out that a relationship built on mutual ambition and strategic networking doesn't hold up well when one person becomes a cautionary tale and the other person realizes they're dating someone with no actual skills. He's moved on to someone who can actually help his career. I've moved on to kids who think coding is magic. I laugh despite myself. 6 weeks. Their great romance, their strategic partnership, their whatever the hell it was had lasted 6 weeks once the money and the glamour and the mutual benefit disappeared. That I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect us to be friends or to have coffee and catch up on old times. I don't even expect you to finish reading this letter. But I wanted you to know that your example, your actual example, not the version of you I created in my head to justify my behavior, has been haunting me for 6 months. Every time one of these kids shows me something they've built, every time I see genuine excitement about solving a real problem instead of impressing an audience, I think about you standing in that boardroom, calmly explaining the difference between creating value and performing success. I think about all the times you tried to show me that same difference, and how I was too busy playing CEO to notice that. I hope you're building things that matter. I hope you're working with people who appreciate your brain instead of just your bank account. I hope you found the kind of satisfaction that doesn't need an audience to validate it. That I hope you're happy. Sophia.p.s. Elena sent me pictures of the Neuron Layer launch event. It looks like everything Leoratech should have been. People who care about the work more than the party. I'm glad you found them. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Outside, the afternoon light was starting to fade, and I could hear the sounds of people coming home from work, kids playing in the courtyard, the gentle chaos of a neighborhood where people actually lived instead of just existing. The truth was, I didn't know how I felt about Sophia's letter. Angry? Relieved? Sad? Maybe all of those things, or maybe none of them. Maybe the most honest response was just acknowledgement. She'd said what she needed to say, and I'd heard it. And that was enough. I filed the letter in my desk drawer, next to the incorporation papers for Leoratech and the patent documents and all the other artifacts of a life I used to live. Not because I was keeping it as evidence or planning to frame it or anything dramatic like that. Just because some things deserve to be preserved, even when you're not sure. WHY.my phone bust. Text from Tund, my star student who was working on an AI system to help small farmers optimize crop rotation. Professor Kwan, the Ghana pilot program results are in. 23% increase in crop yield. The farmers want to expand the system to 3 more villages. I smiled and typed back. Excellent work. Let's talk about scaling on Thursday. Real problems, real solutions, real impact. Just like we talked about in class. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. You know what winning actually looks like. It's not applause or magazine covers or ice sculptures shaped like your company logo. It's standing in your office, your real office, not some marble temple to corporate excess. Watching people solve problems that mattered. I was back at Leoratech, but it looked nothing like the place Sophia had turned into her personal stage. Gone were the champagne fountains and artisanal coffee bars and networking lounges that served no purpose except burning money. Instead, the space hummed with the sound of actual work. Keyboards clicking, code compiling, engineers collaborating on solutions instead of posing for LinkedIn photos. Janet Cross walked by, no longer clicking her pen like a nervous metronome. She'd thrived under actual financial guardrails, turned out. Amazing what happens when someone gives you clear rules instead of vague suggestions about brand building and executive presence. My phone buzzed. Layla, texting from Neuron Layer's new offices. Microsoft deal is official. 3-year contract, $127 million. Also, Elena says hi and wants to know if you're free for dinner Thursday. Somewhere that serves actual food, not networking opportunities. I smiled and typed back. Tell Elena yes, and congratulations on changing the world. That afternoon, I walked through Columbia's campus to my advanced AI ethics class. Aria Nguyen had just defended her thesis on algorithmic bias in healthcare, work that MIT was already trying to recruit her for. Tund Okafor's crop optimization system was expanding to 12 African countries, helping farmers increase yields while reducing environmental impact. Real work. Real impact. Real people solving real problems. That evening, I stood at my apartment window, watching Central Park settle into darkness 34 floors below. No, wait, I wasn't 34 floors up anymore. I was on the 8th floor of a building where people knew each other's names, where Mrs. Chen still brought me dumplings, where success was measured in satisfied customers and students who changed the world instead of press coverage and quarterly projections. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mr. Kwan, this is Sarah Martinez from TechCrunch. We're doing a follow-up piece on the Leora Tech transition. How would you define success now compared to a year ago? I looked around my comfortable apartment, thought about my students defending dissertations that would help millions of people, considered the quiet satisfaction of building things that mattered instead of things that impressed. Success, I said, is when you don't need an audience to validate your accomplishments. When the work speaks for itself, and the impact matters more than the applause. That's unexpectedly philosophical for a tech CEO. Maybe that's the problem with how we define leadership in this industry. After I hung up, I poured myself a small glass of that 25-year-old Glendronach and sat in my comfortable chair with a book about quantum mechanics. Outside, the city continued its eternal dance of ambition and dreams and people trying to make something of themselves. But for the first time in years, I wasn't part of that frantic energy. I was exactly where I belonged, doing exactly what I was meant to do, with people who valued substance over style. My phone buzzed one more time. Elena, sending a photo from Neuron Layer's celebration dinner. 20-something brilliant engineers raising glasses of beer, grinning like they'd just discovered fire. The caption read, "Thank you for showing us what real success looks like." I smiled and turned off my phone. Some victories don't need documentation. They just need to be real. Outside, Manhattan glittered with a million stories of people chasing their definitions of winning. But up here, in a quiet apartment where the coffee came from a simple machine and the furniture was chosen for comfort instead of status, I'd found something better than winning. I'd found peace. And in a city that never sleeps, in an industry that never stops performing, in a world that confuses noise with progress, peace was the rarest victory of all. The war was over. The battlefield was quiet. And for the first time in years, Adrian Kwan was exactly where he belonged.
"You're off the project until you publicly apologize to my ex-husband," my wife, the CFO, yelled in the all-hands. I just nodded. "Okay." Next morning, she smirked. "Learned your lesson." Then she saw my desk cleared and the resignation letter. The company lawyer burst in, pale, shouting, "Ma'am, tell me you didn't." It started on a Thursday morning, the kind that already smelled like burnt coffee, recycled ambition, and bad decisions dressed in business casual. The office was buzzing with that fake kind of productivity people put on before an all-hands meeting. You know the drill. Everyone suddenly clicking their mouse extra loud like the sound itself makes them look important. Me? I was in my cubicle, running on 4 hours of sleep and pure caffeine spite. For the past 3 weeks, I'd been cleaning up an audit disaster left behind by the company's favorite visionary consultant, also known as my wife's ex-husband, Adrian Foster. Yeah, you heard that right. My wife's ex. A man whose entire personality could be summarized as LinkedIn post with bad lighting. Adrian had been demoted a few months ago after his revolutionary compliance automation nearly burned down our accounting system. Instead of firing him, upper management gave him a participation trophy title, Strategic Consultant. Translation: someone who gets paid a six-figure salary to say buzzwords like synergy and cross-functional alignment without doing anything measurable. Meanwhile, I was the guy working nights reprogramming his mess so the company wouldn't get slapped with a federal audit fine. I was expecting at least a quiet acknowledgement at the all-hands meeting, a simple, "nice work, Mason." Maybe even a fake clap from HR. I should have known better. The meeting started like every corporate cult ritual. My wife, Jenna, the chief financial officer, hair flawless, tone managerial, smile expensive, stood at the front of the room with her assistant hovering nearby, holding a tablet like it was the Ark of the Covenant. Behind her stood Adrian, wearing that smug, "I just survived another demotion" grin, and the kind of cologne that could double as a fire hazard. She cleared her throat. "Good morning, everyone. Today's all hands will be short. I just want to address the recent audit situation." I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, waiting for my pat on the back. Instead, she slammed a folder on the conference table so hard half the interns jumped. "Before we move forward," she said, glaring at me like I'd just insulted her dog, "I need to make something clear. Mason is off the audit project until he issues a public apology to Adrian." The entire room went silent. You could have heard a stapler drop 3 cubicles away. Even the HR director, Karen with a K, blinked so hard her eyelash extensions nearly took flight. Adrian folded his arms, doing that fake, humble head tilt people do when they're secretly thrilled to be part of drama. "It's not personal," he said, pretending to sound gracious. "It's just about maintaining team harmony." Team harmony? This is coming from a guy who once misspelled the word budget in a board presentation and blamed the intern's energy. I set my coffee cup down and just stared at them both. Not in anger, not in shock. Just that calm, neutral kind of stare that says, "Oh, you think you're in charge now?" Cute. Everyone was waiting for me to explode, to argue, to defend myself, to throw out a, "That's ridiculous." Instead, I smiled. "Okay. Just one word. Crisp, clean, polite. The verbal equivalent of pulling a grenade pin and walking away." Jenna blinked. "Excuse me?" I said, "Okay," I repeated, calm as meditation music. Then I leaned back, crossed my arms, and looked around the room like we were voting on whether pineapple belongs on pizza. She was expecting a scene. The whole office was. People were already adjusting their mental popcorn supply. But instead, I gave them silence, the kind that makes people uncomfortable because they don't know what comes next. HR coughed nervously. Someone at the back whispered, "Did he just say okay?" Adrian shifted in his seat, clearly thrown off that I wasn't performing the meltdown they all wanted. See, I'd learned something about corporate life a long time ago. Loud anger gets you labeled unprofessional. Quiet compliance, that's how you start wars. Jenna gathered her notes, visibly irritated that her dramatic little power play didn't hit the emotional notes she rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror that morning. "Fine," she said sharply. Meeting adjourned. People scattered faster than interns, avoiding unpaid overtime. Adrian lingered behind, pretending to help her collect papers, but mostly trying to look important. I grabbed my coffee mug, stood up, and gave him that half smile I reserve for people who think they've won. "Congratulations on the promotion," I said, tone smooth as butter. "Hope you enjoy the view from middle management purgatory." He chuckled awkwardly. "You know, Mason, you really need to learn how to work with people. That attitude's what keeps you from real leadership roles." "Right," I said, pretending to think about it. "Because leadership's about letting your wife's ex manage your projects without basic literacy in Excel." His smile faltered for half a second before he recovered. "It's just business, man." "Sure," I said, nodding like I believed him. "Just business." But inside, I was already 3 steps ahead. Because here's the thing. When someone tries to humiliate you publicly, the real power move isn't fighting back. It's letting them think they succeeded. Let them dance on your ego while you quietly pull the floor out from under them. I walked out of that meeting with my dignity intact, my reputation slightly bruised, and a new plan forming faster than my coffee could cool. Back at my desk, people avoided eye contact like I was contagious. HR peeked out from her office, probably drafting an email with "incident" in the subject line. One of the interns, Jake, mouthed, "Are you okay?" from behind his monitor. I smiled and mouthed back, "Never better." I spent the rest of the morning off the project, which really just meant I had time to clean up a few personal files, make a few encrypted backups, and recheck some contracts I hadn't looked at since the company rebranded. Every click was therapy. Every file I saved was a quiet little act of defiance. Around lunch, Jenna texted me. "Jenna, we'll talk about this later." Me. "Sure thing, bring Adrian. He seems to be running things now." No reply. By 3 p.m., Adrian sent me a Slack message, probably thinking he was extending an olive branch. "Adrian, no hard feelings, right? Let's keep this professional." "Mm-hmm." "Of course, I'd hate to see you get emotional at work again." He didn't respond either. When I got home that evening, Jenna was waiting in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, acting like nothing happened. "Rough day?" she asked, swirling her Chardonnay like she was auditioning for the Real Housewives of Finance. "Not really," I said, loosening my tie. "I just got some free time." She laughed nervously. "You're not actually mad, are you? You embarrassed Adrian during a meeting. You practically called him incompetent." "Because he is incompetent," I said. "You know that better than anyone. You divorced him." Her jaw tightened. "That's not the point, Mason. He's trying to rebuild his career. You don't have to make it harder." I smiled. "I didn't. You did." She sighed and looked away. "You know, sometimes I think you don't understand how corporate politics work. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. I just don't play checkers with people who think they're playing chess. She rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. Me? Never, I said, leaning against the counter. But hey, thanks for the public character assassination today. It really added some flavor to my Thursday. She took another sip of wine, clearly realizing this wasn't going to end in a hug. You could just apologize, Mason. It would make things easier. For who? I asked. You, him, the HR department that's already drafting a memo titled, When Spouses Work Together, a Cautionary Tale. Mason, I put my beer down and smiled faintly. You know what? You're right. Maybe I should apologize. Her face softened. Really? Yeah, I said. Tomorrow morning, publicly. She exhaled, relieved. Good, that's all I'm asking. Of course, I said, walking past her toward the stairs. You'll get your apology. What she didn't realize was that my version of an apology doesn't come with tears and groveling. It comes with strategy. It comes with silence, paperwork, and a smile that says you should have known better. That night, while she scrolled through her phone in bed, probably texting her friends about how she handled the situation professionally, I was in the study revisiting old files, contracts, archives, system diagrams. My insurance policy. The kind of paperwork that makes or breaks empires. As I flipped through an old digital folder labeled Consulting Agreement, Legacy Systems, a grin crept across my face. Clause 9B. It was still there. My secret ace. I leaned back in my chair, sipping what was left of my beer, and whispered to myself, Congratulations, Jenna. You just lit the fuse. There's a specific smell offices get when politics start rotting the air, like burnt toner and silent resentment. It had been 4 days since Jenna's little performance at the all-hands meeting, and people were still whispering like middle schoolers in detention. I couldn't walk to the coffee machine without catching fragments of gossip floating through the cubicle jungle. Did you see how calm he was? Maybe they're fighting at home. I heard she made him sleep in the guest room. Oh, the drama. If this place ever went under, it could survive another decade, just selling its gossip as reality TV. Adrian, my wife's ex and my newly self-appointed supervisor, had officially returned to strategic consulting, which is corporate speak for, let's pretend this guy still matters. He'd somehow convinced upper management that his catastrophic system redesign was ahead of its time, which in Adrian language meant, it still doesn't work, but I found better synonyms. He strutted into every meeting like he owned the building, all smiles and cologne strong enough to knock out a small horse. His PowerPoint slides had gradient backgrounds, motivational quotes, and exactly zero substance. My favorite was the one titled The Future of Integration, a holistic approach to team resilience. Spoiler alert, it was 12 slides of circles and arrows pointing to nothing. Meanwhile, Jenna was all business. No pet names, no casual, hey babe, not even a smirk. She'd gone full CFO mode. Emails with, per my last message, calendar invites labeled urgent alignment, and meetings that felt like cross-examinations. We used to talk about vacation plans. Now we discussed budget variances. I wasn't sleeping next to my wife anymore. I was sleeping next to the company's risk management strategy. On Tuesday morning, I arrived early, mostly to enjoy 10 minutes of silence before the circus began. I grabbed a cup of the world's saddest coffee, sat at my desk, and opened my inbox to find 36 unread emails. 20 of them were from Adrian. Subject lines like, audit workflow alignment, follow-up on follow-up, touching base on yesterday's touch base. I swear this man could write a novel about nothing and still CC half the company. I clicked one open and nearly laughed out loud. Hey Mason, just looping back on our ongoing collaboration. I noticed your risk flag parameters don't match our new operational philosophy. Let's recalibrate our synergy moving forward. Operational philosophy. The man was talking about code and using words better suited for a yoga retreat. I replied, hey Adrian, thanks for flagging that. I'll make sure my parameters align with your evolving spiritual journey. Then I hit send and took a long, satisfied sip of coffee. By 9:30 a.m., the day's first meeting began. Jenna had called it an interdepartmental transparency sync, which, if you speak corporate, translates to mandatory group therapy session. The entire compliance department crammed into conference room B, where the thermostat was permanently stuck between sauna and freezer burn. Adrian stood at the head of the table like a motivational speaker who'd lost his audience years ago. Morning, team, he chirped, clapping his hands. Before we dive in, I just want to acknowledge the great progress we've made bridging departmental silos. Translation. He wanted credit for something he didn't do. Jenna sat next to him, tablet in hand, pretending to take notes, but mostly keeping her eyes on me, like she was studying a particularly uncooperative science experiment. Adrian clicked to his first slide, a stock photo of people high-fiving. Let's talk about emotional alignment and compliance, he said. I nearly choked on my coffee. Emotional alignment? He smiled like a man who'd read half a self-help book and decided he was Gandhi. Yes, we're all people before we're employees. If we can connect emotionally, we can build trust, and trust leads to better audits. Right, I said, leaning forward, because nothing says trust like a surprise HR meeting. A few people snorted. Adrian ignored it. And to demonstrate this, Jenna and I are going to lead a quick exercise. Now, if you've never seen your wife and her ex lead a corporate team-building exercise, congratulations. You've probably made better life choices than I have. Let's do something fun, Adrian said, grinning like a man seconds away from being punched. Everyone pair up with a coworker and share one professional insecurity and one personal strength. He looked right at me. Mason, why don't you start with me? Of course that he wanted that. I smiled. Sure thing, boss. We faced each other across the table like duelists. The room was dead silent, except for the hum of the overhead lights. My professional insecurity, I said. I sometimes worry about working under leadership that doesn't understand basic compliance frameworks. A few people coughed to hide their laughter. Jenna pinched the bridge of her nose. Adrian, visibly trying to stay zen, forced a smile. Okay, and your personal strength? I leaned back. Patience. That got an actual laugh from the back. Adrian's smile cracked for half a second before he plastered it back on. Good one, he said through his teeth. My professional insecurity is I can be too visionary, and my personal strength is emotional intelligence. I nodded seriously. Interesting, I would have gone with creative resilience and selective memory, but sure. Jenna finally cut in. Okay, that's enough. Let's move on. The rest of the meeting went downhill fast. Adrian tried to present his new audit collaboration framework, which was just my old system rebranded with new colors and worse functionality. Every time he stumbled through an explanation, Jenna jumped in to smooth it over like she was protecting a fragile intern instead of her ex-husband. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My silence was doing all the heavy lifting. When the meeting ended, people scattered like pigeons after fireworks. Adrian stayed behind, pretending to pack up slowly. Jenna lingered too, obviously waiting for the post-meeting talk. Mason, Adrian said finally, you were a little sharp back there. We're trying to foster positivity. I smiled. That's what I was doing. I felt very positive about being honest. He sighed. Look, I know this is weird, but we're professionals. We can rise above personal history. Couldn't agree more, I said, grabbing my notebook. You start. Jenna exhaled loudly. You two sound like children. I raised an eyebrow. You made me report to your ex, Jenna. I'm already living in an HR case study. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Just try to be civil. Always am, I said, heading for the door. Back at my desk, I found another email waiting from her. Not from Jenna, my wife. From J.L. Thompson, CFO. Mason, please ensure all your current documentation aligns with Adrian's consulting revisions by Friday. We'll be reviewing team adaptability metrics next week. Team adaptability metrics. That's CFO code for I'm testing your compliance through passive-aggressive paperwork. I replied, understood, copying HR for visibility. It's amazing how fast an HRCC can change someone's tone. The next 2 days were an absurd circus of fake smiles and overcompensating professionalism. Adrian started dropping by my desk uninvited, using phrases like quick sync and collaboration culture. He'd lean against the cubicle wall like he was in a sitcom, sipping from his company mug with the words, "Innovation starts with you" printed on it. Hey man, he'd say, just checking if we're aligned. Oh, we're aligned, I'd reply. You're facing north, I'm facing the exit. By Thursday afternoon, I was done pretending. During a review session, he proudly showcased a new code model that was literally my design from 6 months ago. copy-pasted and renamed Fosterflow 2.0. The nerve. Everyone nodded politely, pretending not to notice. I watched in silence, arms folded and sipping my coffee. When he finished his speech, he looked at me expectantly. "So, Mason, thoughts?" I smiled. "Yeah, I think plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery." The room went silent. Jenna shot me a death glare. Adrian's smile twitched. "You're funny," he said, voice tight. "Thanks. Mine," I said. "It's a coping mechanism." After the meeting, Jenna cornered me in the hallway. "You're pushing it," she hissed. "I'm not pushing anything," I said. "I'm just adapting, per your last message." She groaned. "You're impossible." "Yeah," I said, walking past her. "That's why you married me. Twice the entertainment, half the meetings." That night, we sat through dinner in silence. She scrolled through her phone while I replayed every conversation of the day in my head, each one confirming what I already knew. This wasn't just office politics anymore. This was a marital Cold War disguised as quarterly alignment. When she finally looked up, she said, "Adrian thinks you're undermining him." I almost laughed. "I don't need to undermine him, Jenna. He's doing that all by himself." She shook her head. "You can't keep doing this. You're making me look bad." "Sweetheart," I said, pushing my plate away. "You made yourself look bad the moment you asked your husband to apologize to his replacement." She didn't respond, just got up and walked upstairs, leaving her wine half finished. I cleaned the table quietly, poured myself another drink, and looked out the window at the dark city skyline. My reflection in the glass looked tired, sure, but amused. Because even as the office descended into chaos, I wasn't panicking. See, the beauty of corporate warfare is that everyone thinks they're the hero until the paperwork says otherwise, and me, I wasn't done yet. Friday morning began like every other exercise in corporate self-delusion. Lukewarm coffee, a calendar full of meetings that could have been emails, and an inbox screaming for attention like a toddler with an iPad. I'd barely sat down when the company-wide Zoom invite popped up on my screen. Mandatory all hands, hosted by CFO Jenna Thompson. The subject line already smelled like drama. Mandatory, hosted by my wife, at 9 a.m. on a Friday? That wasn't an update. That was a public execution with better lighting. I texted my coworker, Ryan, from IT. Me. "She's doing it, huh?" Ryan. "Yup, HR brought donuts. That's how you know it's bad." I sighed, closed the spreadsheet I'd been pretending to work on, and joined the call. 200 tiny faces appeared, tiled across my monitor like a digital hostage lineup. Some had cameras off, others were pretending to type, and a few had that glazed "I'm mentally on Indeed.com" expression. Jenna appeared in the center box, perfectly framed, hair immaculate, that CFO calm plastered on like a PR stunt. "Good morning, everyone," she said brightly, voice smooth enough to butter toast. "I appreciate you joining on such short notice." Oh, here we go. Adrian's face hovered beside hers, beaming like a proud intern who had just discovered the share screen button. He wore a navy blazer that screamed, "I practiced this speech in the mirror." Jenna continued, "As you all know, we've been working on reestablishing a culture of collaboration after recent tensions." Tensions. I almost spit out my coffee. Tensions is what you call a bad Wi-Fi signal. Not your CFO publicly disciplining her husband because her ex couldn't follow basic compliance procedure. She clicked to the next slide, a company stock photo of smiling employees around a whiteboard, the kind of picture that smells like unpaid overtime. Now, I wanted to address an internal concern regarding leadership behavior. Someone in the chat wrote, "Oh boy." She looked directly into the camera, at me. "It's been brought to my attention that certain individuals have been creating a culture of fear and inflexibility." The room, or rather, the entire digital hive, went silent. You could feel 200 people holding their breath. "While technical excellence is important," she continued, "team harmony is equally vital. When feedback becomes confrontation and collaboration turns into control, we all lose." I took another slow sip of coffee. Classic. Corporate translation: "We're not mad you fixed the system, we're mad you made us feel stupid about it." Then came the dagger. "Effective immediately," she said. "Mason will be removed from oversight of all ongoing compliance audits until further review." My Slack blew up instantly. Private messages flooding in. "Dude, what did you do? Are you okay?" You need a lawyer? Adrian, ever the opportunist, leaned forward with that condescending smile he must have practiced during his divorce hearings. To clarify, he added, this isn't punitive. It's about promoting a safe and creative work environment. Safe and creative. Yeah, because nothing screams creativity like firing the guy who kept your company from a federal fine. My screen lit up with faces pretending to look sympathetic while secretly loving the drama. HR blinked so hard I thought her webcam froze. Even the CEO's little window flickered, probably debating whether to step in or grab popcorn. Jenna clasped her hands, waiting for my reaction. The moment hung heavy, awkward, almost cinematic. She expected me to argue, to unmute, defend myself, make it messy. That's what everyone wanted. The fireworks, the scandal, the emotional confession. Instead, I smiled. Just slightly. Then I unmuted. Okay. One word. Calm, polite, and lethal. 200 faces froze. Adrian's smile twitched like a dying battery. Jenna blinked twice, thrown completely off script. Sorry, she asked, voice trembling just a little. You're right, I said evenly. Culture's important. Please proceed. Then, without another word, I clicked leave meeting. Boom. Gone. No mic drop, no outburst, just silence. The digital equivalent of walking off stage and letting the applause die awkwardly. My phone buzzed immediately. Ryan messaged me again. Ryan. Bro, you just ended the internet. Me. Nah, just optimizing system efficiency. I stood up, stretched, and looked out the window. Outside, the city hummed. Car horns, distant sirens, the usual Friday chaos. It felt poetic. While the company combusted in HR-approved language, I had peace and an iced coffee. Within 10 minutes, my inbox exploded. Emails from Jenna, HR, the CEO, even the company lawyer, Melissa. Subject lines like, urgent, please respond, and let's clarify communication protocol. I didn't open a single one. Let them sweat. Silence was the most underrated weapon in business. It forces everyone else to narrate your motives. By lunch, the rumor mill was spinning so fast it could have powered the server room. I overheard snippets as I walked past the break area. Did you see him just leave? Apparently he's resigning. No, so I heard he's suing. Wait, he's married to the CFO? Yeah, some of them didn't even know. Corporate America, where people you've worked with for 3 years don't know you're married to upper management, but they can quote your Slack emojis. Around 1 p.m., I finally checked my phone. Jenna had texted. Jenna, what was that? You embarrassed me in front of the entire company? Me. Sorry, I thought we were promoting transparency. No reply. At 2:30, she called. I didn't pick up. Then she called again. Finally, I answered on the third ring just to enjoy the suspense. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. You can't just log off a company meeting like that. Sure I can, I said. I clicked a button. Mason, be serious. I am serious, I said. You wanted an apology. You got acknowledgement. That's practically the same thing in corporate language. She sighed, frustrated. You're impossible. Thanks, I said. Put it in my performance review. Click. I went back to my desk, humming softly, pulling up some old files. Not work files, my own archives. Things I'd kept from my early consulting days when this company was a 2-room startup run by caffeine and delusion. Back then, I'd built the backbone of the system. The compliance engines, the audit triggers, the security protocols, the kind of code that makes or breaks billion-dollar acquisitions. And somewhere in that dusty contract folder, I remembered a particular clause. Something I'd written when I was young, paranoid, and legally creative. But I wasn't ready to touch that card yet. Not until they played theirs first. By evening, the entire office had descended into chaos. Someone leaked the Zoom recording. It was already circulating on the company chat channels under the name CFO versus Husband, Dawn of Compliance. HR tried to delete it, but you can't stop the internet once it smells scandal. My phone buzzed again. Ryan calling this time. Dude, he said between laughs, you went viral internally. They're making memes. One's got your face over Thanos saying, okay. Accurate, I said. Perfectly balanced. He snorted. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm also unemployed for the weekend. Man, he said, lowering his voice. You sure you want to poke that bear? Jenna's furious. Good, I said. Means she's predictable. After hanging up, I made dinner, steak, medium rare, because I deserved something satisfying. Jenna didn't come home until late. When she walked in, she looked exhausted. Her power bun, now a war crime. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she snapped. "Yeah," I said calmly, slicing into my steak. "I saved myself a meeting." "This isn't funny, Mason. The CEO wants answers, the board's asking questions, HR is threatening to mediate." "Perfect," I said. "Maybe they'll finally learn what mediation actually means." She threw her bag onto the couch. "Why can't you just cooperate for once?" "Because," I said, looking up, "I'm not the one who turned our marriage into a management case study." Her eyes flashed. "You humiliated me." "You humiliated yourself," I said, tone still even. "All I did was stop participating." For a second, she said nothing, then softer. "You're going to regret this." "Maybe," I said, finishing my bite. "But not tonight." She stormed upstairs without another word. I waited until I heard the bedroom door slam before pulling out my laptop again. If the morning had been humiliation, the night was clarity. I wasn't just angry, I was awake. I'd played by corporate rules too long. Polite, deferential, logical. But the game was rigged. People like Adrian failed upward, while people like me cleaned the mess quietly in the dark. No more. I typed a few lines of code, disabling some back-end redundancies, not destructive, just delicate edits. The kind of changes no one notices until they matter. Then I saved everything to an encrypted drive labeled DRK Core. A little inside joke. When I shut the laptop, I felt lighter. Peaceful even. Let them think they'd won. Let them print memos and whisper about damage control. Monday would come soon enough. And with it, consequences. Because in corporate America, silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a plan taking shape. And me, I was done talking. You ever have one of those mornings where you wake up and realize the storm you caused is now trending on Slack? That was me on Monday. I opened my laptop, and before the login screen even blinked, my phone buzzed nonstop. Emails, messages, notifications. The company hadn't just imploded. It had turned into a full-blown corporate opera. HR sent a reminder about professionalism. The CEO sent a "we value every voice" email that sounded suspiciously like damage control. Even Adrian, the ex-husband turned consultant turned peacock in a blazer, had sent me a "no hard feelings" note, complete with an emoji handshake. Because nothing says maturity like passive-aggressive clip art. And I wasn't angry. Oh no, I was calm, dangerously calm. Because that kind of chaos meant one thing: they'd finally stepped exactly where I wanted them. 19 years ago, back when this company was called Delta Financial Tech and ran out of a second-hand office above a nail salon, I'd been one of the original architects. Just me, a couple of developers, and a whiteboard that smelled like regret. We'd built the audit systems from scratch, line by painful line of code, duct-taped together with caffeine and paranoia. And because I didn't trust anyone, least of all the founders, who thought legal review meant asking their cousin who'd once watched Suits, I'd written a few protective clauses into my consulting agreement. Nothing dramatic, just insurance. The kind of thing people overlook because they assume the nerd writing it is harmless. Clause 9b. That was my secret weapon. Buried in 4 pages of boring legal jargon, it read, "In the event of termination without cause, all derivative systems remain property of the consultant." Translation: if they ever tried to remove me unfairly, I owned the bones of the company's tech stack. Every script, every compliance tool, every data model, mine. They could fire me, sure, but they couldn't use the system I built without paying for it. I'd written it back when the company had no legal department, and no one read anything past page 2. 18 years later, it was the digital equivalent of a loaded gun gathering dust in the basement. And after Friday's little public humiliation, I figured it was time to start polishing the barrel. I logged into my old archives, encrypted, of course. And there it was. My original contract, time-stamped, digitally signed, notarized. I even had the original email thread, where the founder approved it with a thumbs-up emoji. Classic startup energy. I couldn't help but grin. The beauty of a long career in tech is that people forget you were there before the rebranding, before the mergers, before the shiny logo. They forget you built the engine while they were still learning how to buckle their seatbelts. So while Jenna was upstairs in our home office, probably FaceTiming Adrian about strategic messaging. I was in the living room, laptop open, resurrecting a ghost. I spent hours cross-referencing code versions, system logs, and IP ownership trails. Every keystroke was therapy. Every timestamp was vindication. My music playlist? Lo-fi beats for lawful revenge. By 1 p.m., I had a complete record showing that 90% of the current compliance infrastructure, yes, the same one Adrian bragged about reimagining, was a derivative of my original framework. My name sat quietly in the metadata of every core file like a digital signature that never sleeps. That meant Clause 9b wasn't just a bluff. It was ironclad. Around 2 p.m., Jenna shouted from upstairs, "Mason, can you hop on a quick call? The CEO wants to discuss Friday's incident." Ah, the incident. The corporate euphemism for train wreck we caused but want you to fix politely. I joined the Zoom call. On screen were Jenna, the CEO, HR's favorite emotionless mannequin, and Adrian, smirking like he'd just been promoted to class president. "Good afternoon, Mason," the CEO began. "We wanted to clear the air after Friday's unfortunate situation." I nodded. "Sure, let's clear it." "Mason," Jenna said, professional tone fully loaded, "the company feels your reaction was disproportionate." I raised an eyebrow. "To being publicly reprimanded for doing my job correctly?" Adrian jumped in, smiling that patronizing smile. "Hey man, we're not blaming you. It's just tone matters. You could have handled it with a bit more empathy." "Empathy," I repeated. "For the guy who almost crashed our audit system?" He chuckled awkwardly. "We're all learning." I leaned forward. "That's true. For example, I'm learning how much patience I have for corporate hypocrisy." The CEO cleared his throat. "Mason, let's stay constructive. We'd like to move forward, but we need your cooperation to ensure a smooth transition." "Transition?" I asked. "To what?" "To new leadership on the compliance side," Jenna said carefully. There it was, the soft corporate breakup. "It's not you, it's structure." I smiled slowly. "So, let me get this straight. You're removing me from oversight based on a public accusation with no documented cause?" The CEO hesitated. "Let's not use words like removal. Think of it as reallocation." I leaned back. "Got it. So, termination without cause." Jenna frowned. "No one said termination." "Right," I said, keeping my tone easy. "Just confirming for my notes." They exchanged looks. HR scribbled something in her notebook. Adrian sipped his water, probably trying not to choke on irony. "Anything else?" I asked. The CEO forced a smile. "We'll have HR follow up with the necessary documents." "Perfect," I said. "Please do." And just like that, I ended the call, before they could say another word. The second I closed my laptop, I exhaled. Calm, measured, triumphant. They thought they'd boxed me out. They had no idea they just pulled the trigger on Clause 9b. That night, Jenna acted like everything was fine. She poured herself a glass of wine and talked about investor calls, dinner reservations, quarterly updates. I nodded, smiled, played along. Every marriage has its rhythms. Ours just happened to alternate between romance and legal chess. After she went upstairs, I stayed up late reviewing system access logs. There it was, the telltale sign of arrogance. Adrian had rebranded one of my frameworks under his own consultant account. Audit Core V9 was now Fosterflow 2.0. Cute. I opened the server portal, scrolled down, and smiled when I saw the fine print. See, proprietary module, licensed to Mason Drake Consulting, LLC. The man had just stolen something I legally owned and used it in a corporate environment that had technically terminated me without cause. The poetry of it was almost beautiful. At midnight, I drafted a short email to legal@deltatech.com. Subject: Inquiry regarding IP ownership of derivative compliance systems. Hello. As per my original 2006 consulting agreement, attached, I retain ownership of derivative systems developed under Audit Core V9 architecture. Recent company activities appear to be utilizing said framework without renewed licensing. Please confirm authorization. Regards, Mason Drake. Founder, Drake Core Systems, LLC. I hit send and smiled. At exactly 12:04 a.m., I received the automatic response. Your message has been received. Legal will review within 3-5 business days. Translation: they'd start panicking by Wednesday. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't angry anymore. I was in that rare, golden stage of revenge where patience becomes power. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. The paperwork would do the talking. And the best part? Jenna didn't even know. She still thought she was holding the leash. CFO, queen of the spreadsheets, married to the man she'd publicly disciplined like an intern. She'd find out soon enough that she'd married the system she'd just tried to dismantle. Before heading to bed, I poured one last drink and toasted to the quiet brilliance of fine print. Clause 9B, my silent accomplice. The fuse was lit. The thing about corporate explosions is that nobody ever hears the first click. It's always quiet, too quiet. One day you're in a meeting arguing about brand synergy. The next, your entire infrastructure's eating itself alive. My plan wasn't about revenge. Not really, it was about control. I'd lost that the moment my wife, my CFO, decided to turn a company meeting into a marital firing squad. Now I was taking it back, one silent keystroke at a time. That Friday night, the office was dark except for the pale glow from my monitor. Jenna was upstairs in her home office, FaceTiming her executive circle, which was just code for her wine-drinking therapy group. They all spoke in those self-help mantras like, you have to own your narrative, and remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. Meanwhile, I was downstairs owning my narrative by disabling license keys. I didn't delete anything. I'm not a monster. I just let a few systems expire. A graceful shutdown. No alarms, no chaos, just quiet expiration dates slipping into the digital night. People underestimate how much of a company runs on assumptions. They assume passwords never change, backups always restore, and compliance tools hum eternally in the background. Me? I was the guy who built those assumptions into existence. So all I had to do was let them rest. I sat there in the faint hum of server fans, sipping coffee gone cold, printing out my resignation letter. A simple 3-sentence masterpiece of politeness. Dear Jenna, effective immediately, I resign from my position. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute. Best, Mason Drake. The smiley face wasn't professionalism. It was sarcasm, bound in Times New Roman, a digital wink for whoever found it first. I signed it, slid it into an envelope, and left it on my spotless desk. Upstairs, I heard laughter, the glass clinking kind. I imagined her telling her friends how she'd handled the Mason situation, probably describing me like a stubborn intern she finally disciplined. I smiled at the thought. They had no clue the intern just owned their infrastructure. By midnight, I'd scrubbed every trace of personal data from the system, transferred the core repositories to a secure cloud under my LLC, and revoked all active licenses tied to my name. Not maliciously, legally. Clause 9B wasn't revenge, it was maintenance. They could still function, sort of. They just wouldn't know why everything suddenly needed my permission to breathe. I powered down the monitor, stretched, and caught my reflection in the glass. The look on my face wasn't anger. It was satisfaction mixed with caffeine withdrawal. I went to bed early for the first time in weeks. Jenna thought I was sulking. In reality, I was waiting for Monday morning, 9 a.m., a more satisfying alarm clock than any sunrise. Saturday passed quietly. Jenna spent most of it pretending to work while subtly checking if I'd apologized yet. She floated by my desk once, wine glass in hand, scanning the empty surface where my laptop used to sit. You're not coming to the investor brunch tomorrow? I didn't even look up from my book. Wouldn't miss it, I said. Good, she said too quickly. Because Adrian will be presenting, and it'd look bad if you... Don't worry, I said. I'll be the picture of professionalism. She smiled, satisfied, not realizing that the picture I had in mind was me walking out of the frame entirely. Sunday evening, I cooked dinner, steak, garlic potatoes, wine for her, whiskey for me. Domestic calm before corporate Armageddon. She seemed lighter, like she'd already rewritten the narrative in her head. The big dramatic scene from last week was just one of those moments, something she could file away as character growth in her imaginary TED Talk. Halfway through dinner, she said, "You know, Mason, I think things are getting better. Adrian said the board's impressed with how I handled everything." I almost laughed. Impressed, I said, chewing slowly. Yeah, that's one word for it. She smiled proudly. See? It's all smoothing out. I nodded. It will be, eventually. She missed the tone entirely. That night, while she watched some mind-numbing Netflix reality show upstairs, I made one last adjustment. A single delayed trigger in the license database. A timed expiration that would quietly deactivate their high-tier compliance dashboard Monday morning. Not enough to destroy anything, just enough to make it clear who'd really been running the show. Then, I closed the laptop for good. The soft click felt like a punctuation mark. Monday, 8:59 a.m. The office was buzzing with artificial confidence. Jenna walked into the building wearing her favorite victory heels, the kind that made her sound like a small army approaching. Adrian trailed behind, clutching a stack of printouts he'd definitely made just for show. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. I wasn't there. I was at home, in sweats, bowl of cereal in hand, watching the internal company live stream through a backdoor feed I'd built years ago for diagnostic purposes. Jenna opened the meeting with a bright PR-approved smile. Good morning, team. I know last week was challenging, but I'm proud to say we're moving forward stronger than ever. Someone off camera sneezed. Foreshadowing, probably. Adrian stepped up next, clicking his little remote like he was launching the next iPhone. Thanks, Jenna. Today, I'll be demonstrating our updated compliance dashboards, streamlined for maximum efficiency and transparency. He turned to the projector. As you can see here, blank screen. He clicked again. Nothing. The audience shifted. Jenna frowned. Adrian laughed nervously. Technical glitch, he said. AT, can you... Already checking, came a voice from the back, panicked. The screens behind him flickered like dying fluorescent lights. Then, one by one, the dashboards vanished, replaced by error messages. License invalid. Contact administrator. Adrian's smile froze. Jenna turned pale. The CEO leaned forward, whispering something off mic. Adrian stammered, it's a temporary issue, just a network hiccup. He tried to open the investor portal next. Same message, access revoked. Contact Drake Core Systems. At home, I poured another bowl of cereal. The meeting descended into chaos. People started whispering. It ran around rebooting things. The CFO's composure cracked like bad porcelain. Adrian fumbled through excuses, claiming legacy software interference. Jenna finally snapped, slamming her hand on the podium. Get Mason on the phone, now! Oh, sweetheart, you already did. You just didn't know which phone line I answered. By 10:15, my personal phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text. Jenna, system's down. Please respond. This isn't funny. Me. Funny? No. Educational? Definitely. 5 dots appeared, then vanished. She was typing, deleting, typing again. I could practically feel the panic vibrating through the airwaves. Another text came through, this one from Adrian. Adrian, hey man, we're in a bit of a jam. Can you jump on a quick call? Me, sorry, I'm off the project. It felt poetic. By noon, my inbox exploded with emails from corporate. Urgent, critical, Mason, we need your expertise. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't being petty. I was simply respecting boundaries, the ones they'd so enthusiastically enforced. Around 3 p.m., I took a long walk around the neighborhood. The weather was perfect. Blue sky, soft breeze. The kind of day that makes you realize peace isn't about forgiveness. It's about distance. When I came back, I brewed coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the chaos unfold via company Slack leaks. Screenshots, frantic messages. Employees joking that the ghosts of IT past are haunting us. By 5 p.m., Jenna's tone had shifted from fury to desperation. Jenna, can we talk privately? Please. Me. Sure. Send a calendar invite through your system. No reply. Later that night, she came home. Not the confident CFO anymore, just a woman whose empire was slipping through her manicured fingers. She dropped her bag by the door and looked at me like I was a fire she couldn't figure out how to put out. Mason, she said softly, what did you do? I set down my coffee. I resigned. You disabled the systems. I disabled my systems, I corrected. Big difference. You can't just Clause 9B, I said, calm as ever. Look it up. She blinked. What clause? The one you never read. Her face went blank, the way it does when realization lands like a falling piano. You're saying you own the bones, I finished for her. Every audit engine, every compliance database, every derivative module. I built the skeleton, Jenna. You just dressed it up in designer suits. She sank onto the couch, silent for once. I stood, stretched, and said, Don't worry, I didn't break anything. I just reminded you who built it. Then I walked past her to the door. You should probably tell Adrian to stop presenting dashboards that don't exist. She whispered something I didn't catch. Maybe an apology, maybe disbelief. Either way, I didn't stop to listen. Outside, the air felt crisp and clean. Freedom always smells like coffee and server dust. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even smug. Just done. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't a scandal or a scream, it's a quiet exit signed with a smiley face. Monday mornings are supposed to start with bad coffee and fake smiles, not panic calls from the CFO's office. But when your wife's ex is running the show on a system you legally own, the universe tends to reward irony. At precisely 7:43 a.m., my phone started buzzing like a nest of angry bees. The company hotline, my personal line, even LinkedIn messages, every platform screaming some version of help. I ignored them all, letting the chaos marinate. Nothing makes executives sweat like silence. By 8 o'clock, I was eating cereal on my couch, watching the storm unfold on my private admin dashboard. Not to brag, but it was cinematic. Error alerts flashing like fireworks, database clusters stalling, compliance bots begging for missing credentials. My masterpiece of controlled failure. The best part? Everything was reversible. I hadn't destroyed a thing. I'd simply withheld permission. Like a landlord changing the locks on a tenant who forgot they don't actually own the building. At 8:15, I got a text from my friend Ryan in ET. Ryan, dude, the network's melting. Dashboards being blank. CEO's screaming, Adrian's crying. Me. Crying, or corporate crying. Ryan. He's in the bathroom with his blazer off, so real crying. I couldn't help but laugh. Adrian, Mr. Synergy himself, reduced to a puddle of panic while I sat in my pajamas spooning frosted flakes. Karma was punctual today. By 8:30, the internal Slack channels were chaos incarnate. Someone posted a screenshot. License error. Contact administrator. Drake Core Systems, LLC. My old logo. Still there. Still smug. At 9 o'clock sharp, Jenna's number lit up my phone again. I answered this time, mostly because curiosity's a hell of a drug. Her voice was pure caffeine and desperation. Mason, what the hell did you do? Good morning to you too, I said. The entire system's offline, she snapped. Investors are calling, the CEO's threatening to pull contracts, and Adrian, let me guess, I said. He's presenting graphs that don't exist? This isn't funny, she hissed. Of course it's not funny, I said. It's tragic. A company this size crippled because nobody read Clause 9B. Someone should have hired better lawyers. Mason, she said, voice softening just enough to sound rehearsed. You made your point. Now please fix this before it ruins us. Ruins you, I corrected. I'm fine. She exhaled shakily. Please. I'm asking you as your wife. Wife, I said. Interesting choice of word after last week's meeting. Which role are you using? CFO or spouse? Mason, tell you what, I interrupted, setting down my cereal. I'll consider it if you make a public statement acknowledging that I own the Drake Core framework. I don't even need an apology, just truth. She hesitated. That's impossible. Then so is your login, I said and hung up. Silence. Sweet, liberating silence. I opened my laptop and watched the chaos unfold like the world's most satisfying live feed. The CEO's admin console was flashing unauthorized. The investors' dashboards displayed service suspended. It was in meltdown, rebooting servers like a defibrillator with no heart to revive. And Adrian, oh, poor Adrian, was in a meeting trying to manually explain data trends he couldn't access. Ryan sent another update. Ryan, Bro, he tried to draw the graphs by hand on a whiteboard. Me. Art therapy. I almost felt bad. Almost. By 9:30, my email inbox overflowed with messages titled Urgent. The CEO himself sent one that began with Mr. Drake instead of Hey Mason. That's when you know they're scared. They switched to formality from CEO, Prime Union Holdings. Subject, immediate assistance requested Mason. It appears our systems have encountered a serious licensing issue. We believe this may relate to your legacy infrastructure. Please contact me immediately so we can resolve this amicably. Regards, Douglas P. Henley. Amicably. Corporate for before I call my lawyer. I poured another cup of coffee, cracked my knuckles, and replied, from Mason Drake to Douglas P. Henley. Subject, immediate assistance requested, Douglas. I'd be happy to assist. However, as the rightful license holder of the Drake Core Framework, see attached contract clause 9b, my consulting services would need to be re-engaged under standard vendor terms. Please have legal contact my office to discuss retainer options. Warm regards. Mason Drake, founder. Drake Core Systems LLC. I hit send and took a long sip of coffee. That was my version of lighting a cigar after a clean job. At 10 o'clock, Jenna called again. I ignored it. Then she called from her office phone. I ignored that, too. She tried email next. Subject, please. Inside one line. They're blaming me. For a second, just a second, I felt something. Not guilt exactly, but nostalgia. I remembered the woman I married before she became the company. Back when she laughed without spreadsheets and kissed me without scheduling it. Then I remembered her standing in that meeting room shouting, "You're off the project until you apologize to my ex-husband." Yeah, sympathy deleted. Around 11 Ryan texted again. Ryan, bro, HR just sent out a company-wide memo saying, we're experiencing temporary technical adjustments. Man, in corporate translation, we're screwed but don't panic. Ryan, people are panicking. Me, good. By noon, Bloomberg-level panic had set in. The compliance team couldn't access investor data. The audit files were frozen. The automated report system was spitting out error codes like a broken slot machine. Adrian tried rebooting a server manually, which is kind of like trying to perform brain surgery with a spoon. Jenna's third text of the day came through at 12:47. Jenna, the CEO's threatening to fire me. Please, Mason, I'll fix this with you privately. Me, send me the statement. Jenna, what statement? Me, acknowledging ownership, Drake Core, clause 9b. You remember. Jenna, you're blackmailing me. No, I'm invoicing you. At 1:30, the company lawyer, Melissa, called me directly. She sounded winded, like she'd sprinted through 5 meetings and 2 existential crises. Mason, hi, it's Melissa from legal, she said, her tone trying to stay professional but cracking around the edges. We're reviewing the contract and, well, it appears clause 9b is indeed enforceable. Appear, I said. It's notarized, time-stamped, and signed by your founder. Yeah, she sighed. Technically, you own the framework. Technically? I repeated. You're welcome to test that theory in court. She exhaled audibly. Can we discuss a buyout? Sure, I said casually, but my rates have gone up. Supply and demand, you know. She groaned. I'll get back to you. Take your time, I said. You've got about, 0 system access left. By mid-afternoon, the company was hemorrhaging productivity like a sitcom with no writers. The CEO was on the verge of a breakdown. Investors were threatening to pull out. And the internal network chat looked like a therapy session. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my porch, laptop balanced on my knees, watching the chaos from my back-end view. I didn't need popcorn. Their Slack logs were entertainment enough. Then, around 3:45, Jenna showed up at the house. She didn't even knock, just stormed in, heels clicking like tiny gunshots. You need to stop this, she said, standing in the doorway, chest heaving. They're about to shut down operations. I told you, I said calmly, not even looking up from my laptop. I didn't break anything. She crossed her arms. You crippled us. I paused your subscription, I corrected. You can resume any time. Just need to sign the vendor agreement. She glared. You're enjoying this. I looked up finally, met her eyes. Not enjoying, just appreciating accountability. It's rare these days. She sank into the armchair opposite me, her entire posture deflating. They're going to fire Adrian. I'll send flowers. Her voice softened. And me. Actions have consequences? I said, echoing the line she'd used on me once, remember? She didn't respond, just stared at the floor. After a long silence, she whispered, "You win?" I leaned back, tilting my head. It's not a game, Jenna. It's business. The part you always forgot. For the first time in weeks, she didn't have a comeback. No corporate buzzwords, no damage control jargon, just quiet. After she left, I reopened my email and saw a new message from the CEO. Subject, contract negotiation, Mason. We'd like to retain Drake Core Systems immediately. Legal is drafting a new consulting agreement. Expect payment terms within the hour. Respectfully, Douglas P. Henley. I smiled. Respectfully. That's corporate for we surrender. By 6 o'clock p.m., my bank app pinged with a deposit notification. An obscene consulting retainer, paid in full. The same company that publicly humiliated me was now paying me to fix the mess they created. Adrian? Reassigned to strategic ideation. Translation. No duties, no access, no future. Jenna? Suspended pending internal review. HR called it temporary leave to ensure objectivity. I called it karma on PTO. As the sun dipped below the skyline, I closed my laptop and poured a whiskey. For the first time in years, the world felt balanced. You could call it revenge, and I called it realignment. The company got their lesson, Jenna got her reckoning, and I got my piece, plus a very comfortable retainer. And the best part, I didn't raise my voice once, because in corporate America, the loudest power move is silence and a well-timed invoice. There's a distinct kind of silence that only happens after corporate disaster. A heavy, buzzing quiet where everyone pretends to be working while secretly updating their resumes. You could feel it through the walls of Prime Union's glass tower that Tuesday morning. The air conditioning hummed, keyboards clicked like guilty confessions, and somewhere deep inside the building, a printer jammed dramatically, as if protesting the incompetence surrounding it. By 9 p.m., Jenna's name was trending on the internal Slack board. Not officially, of course, but through coded messages. Anyone heard from finance? CFO not in yet. Should we even submit the Q3 review? Translation. Is the queen dethroned? She was still on leave, which in corporate language meant the board's sharpening the guillotine. Adrian, the man who'd started this entire circus, had gone radio silent. According to Ryan in IT, he'd been seen leaving the office carrying a cardboard box full of personal items, including a novelty mug that said, "I'm kind of a big deal." I almost wished I'd been there to see it. I was on my porch again, coffee in hand, scrolling through my phone as if I didn't own half their infrastructure. Technically, I did. Drake Core Systems had been reinstated under a formal vendor contract the night before. The retainer they'd wired me could have bought me a Tesla, a vacation home, or a lifetime supply of pettiness, though honestly, I already had plenty of that. At 9:32 a.m., my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code immediately. The company's legal department. I answered casually. Drake Core Systems. Mason speaking. Mason, thank God, said a voice I recognized. Melissa, the company's lead counsel. She sounded like someone halfway between a stroke and a meltdown. We have a situation. I took a slow sip of coffee. You usually do. No, I mean a real one. Papers rustled on her end, like she was flipping through a legal exorcism. I'm in the CFO's office right now and, well, ma'am, tell me you didn't... There was muffled whispering. Another voice. Jenna's. Shaky. Defensive. It wasn't supposed to be public. Melissa groaned into the phone. Mason, you're going to want to sit down for this. I looked at the chair I was already sitting in. I'm good, she sighed. Jenna tried to delete your Clause 9b documentation from the shared legal server. I paused mid-sip. Tried? Yes, Melissa said, voice strained. Tried as in failed spectacularly. Your clause triggered an automatic backup to the board's cloud repository the moment she tampered with it. The alert went straight to the CEO and the audit committee. I almost spit out my coffee. She what? She thought she could update the contract to remove the clause retroactively. Unfortunately, that's not how contracts work. So the board knows? I asked. Oh, they so know, Melissa said grimly. They're in full panic mode. I've got 3 partners from the parent company's legal division dialing in from New York, demanding explanations. Jenna's in tears, the CEO's pacing, and Adrian's name just got mentioned as a possible liability. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. Sounds like Tuesday. Mason, Melissa continued, voice dropping to a whisper. Off the record. I told them to stop digging before they make it worse. Clause 9B isn't just airtight, it's nuclear. If they keep poking it, they're going to find out they technically licensed their entire audit suite to your LLC for indefinite use. Technically, I said, feigning innocence. Legally, she corrected. It's your system, all of it. I let that sink in for a second. The same people who treated me like an expendable employee now couldn't run a compliance check without my permission. God bless meticulous paranoia and a good lawyer from 2006. Mason, Melissa said, snapping me out of my thoughts. The board's calling an emergency session at noon. They want you there. I blinked. You want me to come back into the building? They're begging you to come back, she corrected. I'd strongly recommend showing up. I couldn't help it. I laughed. This is going to be fun. Walking back into that office felt like stepping onto a movie set after a scandalous finale. Every head turned when I entered. Some curious, some terrified, most pretending to look busy. The receptionist nearly choked on her gum when she saw me swipe my visitor badge. Mr. Drake, she stammered. You're here for the board session? Apparently, I said. Where's the confetti? She didn't get the joke. I rode the elevator up to the 14th floor, executive level. The doors opened to the familiar smell of stress, expensive perfume, and denial. Outside the boardroom, Melissa was waiting, clutching a thick folder like it was her emotional support animal. They're inside, she whispered. And Mason, maybe go easy? No promises, I said. When I walked into the room, it was like a scene out of a courtroom drama. The CEO, Douglas, sat at the head of the table, red-faced and sweating. 3 board members joined via video call from New York, their faces pixelated but clearly annoyed. Jenna sat near the end, pale and quiet, her hair tied back in a defeated bun. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Douglas cleared his throat. Mr. Drake, thank you for joining us on short notice, I smiled. I wasn't doing much. Just running your systems from my couch. One of the board members, an older woman with steel gray hair and a voice that could curdle milk, said, We've reviewed the documentation surrounding Clause 9B. I nodded. Ah, yes, my favorite bedtime story. Her frown deepened. It appears that due to the language in your consulting contract, you retain ownership of the company's core compliance infrastructure. That's correct, I said cheerfully, for nearly 2 decades now. Douglas shifted in his chair. And, Jenna attempted to, how should I phrase this, revise the agreement. All eyes turned to Jenna. She looked like she wanted to vanish into her ergonomic chair. I made a mistake, she said quietly. I thought it was archived data. I didn't realize. The gray-haired board member cut her off. You attempted to delete a binding legal document during an active investigation. That's not a mistake. That's misconduct. The room went dead silent. Melissa tried to smooth things over. Let's remember everyone's under stress. Stress doesn't justify tampering with legal records, the woman snapped. Douglas rubbed his temples. Mason, what would it take to make this right? I smiled faintly. Depends on your definition of right. Mason, he said, trying for diplomacy, you're clearly within your rights, but we'd like to avoid a public fallout. Investors are already nervous. Understandable, I said. I'm willing to help. Relief spread across his face, too soon. For a price, I added. Douglas sighed. Of course. What's your number? I leaned back, savoring the moment. I don't want more money. You've already paid me. What I want is a statement. Public acknowledgement that Drake Core Systems is the sole architect and owner of the compliance framework. That includes full credit in all investor documentation. The board murmured. Douglas hesitated. That's unconventional. So is being fired by my wife, I said. One of the New York board members chuckled before catching himself. After a tense silence, Douglas nodded. Fine, we'll issue the statement. In return, you'll restore system access. Within 24 hours of publication, I said. Written, signed, distributed. He extended a hand. Deal. I shook it. Pleasure doing business, again. As I turned to leave, Jenna finally spoke. Mason, wait. I stopped at the door. She stood, eyes glistening, voice trembling. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I gave a small, humorless smile. You meant to embarrass me in front of the company. Everything after that is just cause and effect. I lost everything. She whispered. No, I said. You just learned who everything belonged to. Then I walked out. By the time I got home, my inbox was already buzzing with the press release draft. Prime Union Holdings acknowledges and thanks Drake Core Systems, LLC, led by Mason Drake, for the proprietary infrastructure that powers our compliance and audit platforms. We are proud to continue this partnership under a renewed strategic agreement. That's corporate code for, we messed up and he owns us now. Ryan texted me 5 minutes later. Ryan, bro, you're a legend. They're calling you the Ghost Founder. Me, that's Dr. Ghost Founder to you? I poured myself a drink and sat back, watching the sunset. For the first time in months, I felt calm. Not vengeful, not smug, just calm. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about balance. And the beauty of balance? You don't need to raise your voice to achieve it. You just need to write one clever clause and wait 18 years for karma to mature. You could measure the chaos inside Prime Union by the sound of Jenna's heels. The faster she walked, the closer someone was to being frustrated. And that Monday morning, her heels could have registered as a seismic event. Click, 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 like an approaching lawsuit with lipstick. From what Ryan texted me, the office looked like a financial apocalypse. Investors were calling, the servers were crying, and the only person with working credentials, me, was making a second cup of French press coffee at home. When you're in control, you don't rush, you let the panic breathe. By 9:00 a.m., the company's Slack had devolved into full-scale hysteria. Departments were tagging me like I was tech support for the universe. At Mason, can you restore access for accounts payable? We have payroll stuck mid-process. At Mason Drake, please respond. Compliance bots have gone feral. At Drake Core Systems, you are our only hope. I sipped my coffee. They finally got it, I muttered. Then came the email from the CEO. Subject line in all caps, never a good sign. Urgent. All systems compromised. Mason, we need immediate intervention. Investors are threatening legal action. I understand you're within your contractual rights, but this has gone beyond a disagreement. Please call me before noon. Douglas. I didn't reply. You never respond when they're panicking. It ruins the power curve. At 9:37, Jenna called again. I almost didn't pick up. Almost. But curiosity is a dangerous hobby. Mason, she said, voice breathless. We're collapsing. Good morning to you too. Don't do this, she said. The board's in meltdown. The systems are unresponsive and Adrian's... Let me guess, I said, hyperventilating into a branded mug. Not funny. She snapped. You're making a point. I get it. But we're both going down with this ship. I leaned back in my chair. Jenna, the difference between you and me is I brought my own lifeboat. Her tone softened, desperation sneaking through the cracks. Please, can we just talk? Privately? Sure, I said. Send a calendar invite. Through your system. I could practically hear her grinding her teeth through the phone. Then, click. By 10 o'clock, the company was trending internally as the Titanic of tech. Someone in marketing leaked a meme showing Adrian as the captain, clutching a coffee cup while the ship sank. For the first time in my career, corporate suffering was entertaining. Then, right on cue, Ryan called. Bro, you will not believe this, he said between laughs. Jenna just called an emergency investor meeting. Of course she did, I said. She's addicted to optics. Yeah, well, she walked in looking like a Wall Street power move. White blazer, blood-red heels, face set to, I'm not panicking. But dude, Adrian followed her in wearing a Hawaiian shirt. I choked on my coffee. A what? Apparently he thought it was casual Monday. Jesus Christ, I said. It's like watching reality TV for accountants. Bro, Ryan said, lowering his voice. They're trying to manually rebuild your system. with PowerPoint flowcharts. I set my mug down. PowerPoint? Oh, this is going to be biblical. At 11:15, another text came in. This one from Melissa, the lawyer. Melissa. Mason, FYI, the CFO is attempting to access your private modules through an admin override. Me. Adorable. Melissa. It's triggering internal alerts. It's losing its mind. Me. Good. Builds character. Apparently, Jenna and Adrian were in her office, surrounded by a swarm of interns trying to fix the system by resetting the server keys, which in non-corporate English is like trying to repair a jet engine with a hairdryer. At 11:40, my phone buzzed again. Ryan this time, voice barely containing laughter. She's screaming at it, man, full CFO mode. You know that tone that makes coffee curdle? Oh yeah, I said. The one she used on me during tax season? Exactly that. But wait, it gets better. Adrian tried to take charge and said, "Don't worry, I used to be a developer." He accidentally logged everyone out of the network, even HR. I laughed so hard I had to put my phone down. That man couldn't debug a toaster. No joke, Ryan said. People are printing resignation letters on the backup printer because the email's dead. Ah, poetic symmetry. By noon, Melissa's number flashed again. I picked up this time. Mason, she said, out of breath. The CEO wants to know if you'll attend an emergency virtual board call at 1. I checked my watch. Depends, will there be snacks? Please, she said. They're desperate. I smiled. Desperation's not a mood, it's a negotiation tactic. At 1 o'clock sharp, I joined the Zoom call. My screen lit up with the usual suspects. Douglas, the CEO, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Melissa, clutching a pen like a stress toy. Jenna, perfectly framed in her designer suit, but visibly unraveling. And Adrian, hiding behind a fake plant in his background. Douglas started. Mason, thank you for joining. We're in a challenging position. Understatement of the year, I said. He exhaled. The investors are demanding operational stability by end of day. We need your cooperation to restore access. Sure, I said. Once the acknowledgement statement goes public. Jenna interjected, voice trembling but trying to sound firm. The board hasn't approved that yet. That's interesting, I said, because my patience hasn't approved your access either. Douglas held up a hand. All right, let's de-escalate. Mason, you've made your point. We all understand the ownership structure now. I'm not sure you do, I said. Ownership isn't just a legal word, Doug. It's a boundary. You all crossed mine when you made me apologize to my wife's ex in front of 200 people. So now, I'm setting new boundaries. Melissa looked like she wanted to applaud, but remembered her job. Douglas rubbed his forehead. What do you want, Mason? I leaned closer to the camera. A correction, not a quiet one. I want the same energy you used to humiliate me. Press releases, internal memos, all of it. You name me as the architect of Prime Union's infrastructure. You sign the retainer contract. And Jenna issues a statement acknowledging the clause. Otherwise, we let the lights stay off. The silence afterward was delicious. Adrian tried to speak. Look, Mason, I think... Don't, I said. You thinking is how we got here. He shut up. Jenna looked at me through the screen, her voice finally cracking. You're destroying everything. No, I said quietly. I'm just reminding you who built it. Douglas nodded slowly, defeated. Fine. We'll release the statement by close of business. Once you confirm restoration, we'll wire the next retainer installment. Pleasure doing business, I said, and logged off. That evening, I walked downtown just to feel the city again. Everything buzzed with noise. Cars honking, coffee shops crowded, people yelling into phones. It was chaos, but it was honest chaos. Not the polished kind you get in corporate offices where betrayal smells like cinnamon-scented air freshener. By the time I got home, the email was waiting. Subject, official statement for review. Prime Union Holdings formally recognizes Drake Core Systems LLC as the proprietary architect and primary vendor for our compliance infrastructure. We express appreciation to its founder, Mason Drake, for his continued innovation and partnership. Short, clean, factual, and the sound of surrender. Attached was another file, the signed retainer. Bigger, better, long-term. I restored system access at exactly 7:05 p.m. watching as dashboards flickered back to life across the globe. In every office, a sigh of relief rippled through the corporate hive. To them, it was salvation. To me, it was proof that silence had done more damage than shouting ever could. A message pinged on my screen. Ryan, of course. Ryan. Back online. Whole companies cheering like they saw Jesus. Me. Tell them it's just the IT guy. Then one more notification. An email from Jenna. Jenna, it's done. You won. I hope you're proud. I typed back slowly. Me. It was never about winning, just about remembering who I am. I didn't hit send. Some messages are better left as drafts. Proof you had restraint. I closed the laptop, poured a drink, and sat back. Outside, the city lights shimmered like 1,000 blinking dashboards. Alive again, but running on my terms. Chaos in heels, order in silence. You know what's funny about revenge? It doesn't end when you win. It just changes its job title. I thought I'd reached the end game when Prime Union crawled back begging for system access. I'd done my victory lap, collected my fat retainer, and given them back their digital heartbeat. But the universe wasn't done turning this circus into a comedy special. It started 2 weeks later on a Wednesday that smelled like burnt espresso and moral exhaustion. My phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. Prime Union Holdings posted a new job opening, Chief Technology Officer, CTO. I almost spit out my coffee. The position used to belong to a guy named Harris, a numbers-driven quiet type who'd been trying to retire since 2019. Apparently, he'd stepped down for personal reasons. Translation. He'd finally realized this company was cursed and ran before the next wave hit. 5 minutes later, another notification popped up. You've been tagged in a post. I tapped it, half expecting another "Thank you, Drake Core" PR post. Nope, it was Douglas, the CEO himself, with the caption, "Proud to announce our continued partnership with Drake Core Systems and its founder, Mason Drake, as we expand into new innovation leadership opportunities." Leadership opportunities, I repeated it aloud. Corporate code for "we can't fire our problem, so we'll promote him instead." Before I could process it, my phone rang. Caller ID, Douglas Henley. I sighed, answered. "Doug, if this is another system panic, I charge double for weekends." He chuckled nervously. "Not this time, Mason. This is different. The board has been talking. They want to offer you the CTO position." I blinked. "Of Prime Union?" "Of the entire holdings group," he clarified. "You'd oversee all infrastructure, global compliance, everything you already control, but with an official title, full executive benefits." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. "Doug, I already control those things. The difference is, right now, I get paid more and attend fewer meetings." He tried his reasonable CEO voice. "I understand, but look, our investors want stability, and they trust you. After what happened, they see you as the reason we survived." "I am the reason you survived," I said. "That's why I'm not sure I want to be trapped in the building I rescued." He sighed. "Come on, Mason. You'll have freedom, creative control, equity." Ah, the magic word, equity. "Send me the offer," I said finally. "I'll review it." He exhaled in relief. "Fantastic. I'll have HR draft it by tomorrow." When the call ended, I sat there grinning into my coffee mug. Life really is poetic. 1 month ago, I was the company's scapegoat. Now I was being offered a throne built from their panic. By Thursday morning, the official offer letter was in my inbox. I skimmed it, half amused, half impressed. The salary was obscene. The perks included stock options, a corner office, and the authority to hire and fire across departments, including finance. Translation: I could technically fire my wife. I shouldn't have enjoyed that thought as much as I did. At 10 a.m., Douglas called again for informal follow-up. His voice was all sunshine and spin. "So, Mason, can we make this official? The board's excited. Melissa's already cleared your contract." "Before I accept," I said, "I have one condition." "Of course," he said quickly. "Name it." "Jenna stays off my chain of command. No overlap. No reporting structure, no shared meetings, nothing." There was a pause. Then, cautiously, "Understood. She's no longer with us, actually." I froze. "Come again?" "She submitted her resignation last night, effective immediately." I didn't know what to say. The room felt too quiet. She said she needed time, Douglas added softly. Personal reasons. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Of course she did. Chaos always costs someone their peace. Understood, I said finally. Send me the onboarding schedule. Welcome aboard, CTO, he said too cheerfully. That Friday, I walked into Prime Union for the first time as an executive. It was surreal. The same front desk that once ignored me now smiled like I was royalty. Good morning, Mr. Drake. Can we get you anything? Coffee? Pastry? I'm good, I said. Just here to make sure the building's still standing. The elevator ride up felt like deja vu, only quieter. No whispers, no side eyes. People avoided making direct contact, like I was both a savior and a warning sign. In a way, I was. When the doors opened to the executive floor, Douglas was waiting with his practiced enthusiasm. Mason, welcome back. Orwell up. He handed me an access badge with a sleek silver stripe, the kind that screamed authority with plausible deniability. We did the tour, conference rooms, the innovation lab, the executive pantry, with cold brew taps and overpriced granola. It was everything a modern tech company thinks screams we care about people while quietly owning their souls. When we reached my new office, Douglas gestured proudly. Your view faces downtown. Best skyline in the city. It was ridiculous. Floor-to-ceiling windows, private lounge, standing desk made from recycled Aeroraft aluminum. I ran my hand across it and couldn't resist saying, nice, expensive, unnecessary, perfect. He laughed awkwardly. You'll fit right in. After he left, I sat behind my new desk, looking out over the city. It was strange. This exact building had been the backdrop of every humiliation, every sarcastic whisper. Now it was my territory. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or burn sage. The first email that landed in my inbox came from HR. Welcome to the leadership team, mandatory executive retreat next quarter. The second was from legal, updated non-disclosure terms for your review. The third was from Ryan. Ryan. Bro, CTO, are you like Iron Man now? Me. More like Batman. Rich, bitter, nocturnal. Ryan. You firing people yet? Me. Tempted. Later that afternoon, I ran into Adrian in the hallway. He looked smaller somehow. The Hawaiian shirt was gone, replaced by an ill-fitting suit. He was carrying a cardboard box again. Mason, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Congrats on the new title. Thanks, and I said, heard you've been reassigned. He laughed weakly. Yeah, to strategic ideation. Still figuring out what that means. It means they don't want to fire you yet, but they want you to think about why you should have quit sooner. His smile faded. Right. He turned to leave, then paused. Look, I know we've had differences, but for what it's worth, you played it smart. I shrugged. It's not chess if your opponent doesn't know the rules. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Good luck, Mason. You too, I said, though we both knew Luck had left his department months ago. That evening, after everyone cleared out, I stayed in the office a little longer. I opened the internal database, scrolling through lines of code that still bore my old tags. There they were, my fingerprints in every subroutine, every system heartbeat. Proof that the Empire ran because I'd built its bones. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt quiet, almost lonely. Power's funny that way. It amplifies silence. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Jenna. Congrats on the promotion, you earned it. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, thanks, hope you're doing okay. No reply. I looked out at the city again. The skyline blinked like a circuit board. Each window, a little light pulsing with ambition, greed, and caffeine. Somewhere out there, Jenna was probably trying to figure out who she was without the company. I couldn't blame her. I'd spent years doing the same. Now that I had everything, I realized everything didn't feel as loud as I thought it would. Still, I smiled, because even if peace felt weird, it beat humiliation. The next morning, Douglas stopped by my office holding 2 coffees. Welcome to the club, he said, handing me one. We're glad to have you steering the ship. Appreciate it, I said, though technically I already was. He laughed. It's true, but now it's official. He lingered awkwardly before asking, So, how's it feel after everything? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline. Feels like poetic irony with health insurance. He laughed again, a little too hard. That's one way to put it. As he left, I opened my email again. 20 unread messages, all labeled urgent. Same chaos, different title. I chuckled, cracked my knuckles, and whispered to no one, Let's make it interesting. By the end of the week, the news broke publicly. Prime Union Holdings appoints former consultant as new CTO after historic infrastructure overhaul. Reporters called it visionary. Investors called it stability. Employees called it plot twist of the year. Me? I called it what it was. The unexpected promotion that wasn't unexpected at all. Because in corporate America, the best revenge isn't burning bridges. It's buying the company those bridges lead to. A week after the promotion, I sat in my new office. Same skyline, new title, better coffee. The chaos had finally gone quiet. No more emergency calls, no ex-husbands lecturing about synergy, no CFO wife trying to rewrite my story in real time. Just peace. The kind that hums when you've finally stopped proving things to people who never deserved explanations. They called it a comeback. I called it good paperwork. The press loved the redemption arc, the ousted engineer who saved the empire. They didn't know I never left. You can't be fired from a system you own. The funniest part? My silence had done more damage than any angry email or lawsuit ever could. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a door. I just let the system speak for me, one error message at a time. Adrian was quietly reassigned to something called strategic ideation, which sounded like a polite way of saying, we'll call if we remember you exist. Jenna disappeared from the corporate map, her LinkedIn quietly updated to consultant somewhere generic. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't love her either. I'd simply outgrown the version of myself that needed her approval. One evening, I went home early. No meetings, no crisis. I made dinner, poured a drink, and watched the sunset reflect off the skyscrapers I used to resent. My phone buzzed with another LinkedIn message. Congrats again on your journey, Mason. You're inspiring. I laughed out loud. Journey, that's what people call it when you survive hell with better lighting. I walked over to the fireplace, tossed in the old printed copy of my contract, the one that started everything. Watching it curl and burn felt symbolic. Not because I was erasing history, but because I'd already archived the important part. Me. The guy who built something unbreakable, lost it, and took it back without shouting. The next morning, I got a call from an investment group. They wanted to license Drakecore's framework for a new fintech startup. Triple the rate Prime Union paid. I didn't hesitate. Send the contract, I said, smiling. As I hung up, I realized I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing quiet. Because revenge burns out fast. But silence lasts. Before leaving the office that day, I left a sticky note on my desk for whoever inherited it after me someday. It said, never underestimate the guy who smiles and says, okay. I turned off the lights, closed the door, and walked away. Not bitter, not broken. Just done. And in that silence, I finally laughed. Not the loud, triumphant kind. The calm, private kind that says, you won. Because in the end, I didn't destroy the company. I just reminded them who built it.